Hello, everybody. Welcome to Frame Trap. In the awesome shirt over there, I've got Mr. Daniel Bloodworth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think somebody said the same.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you where you got it. I've been defeated because I would totally buy that shirt. And Brandon Jones.
I realize I'm wearing Frame Trap color. I'm like in the middle, Frame Trap red.
Looking good, Brandon Jones.
Thanks. Feeling cozy. I like when the weather dips and I get to start wearing some long sleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few
It's a
shirts that
nice
have just been
change.
sitting there for sure, yeah.
My wife and I went to a musical yesterday, and we were in Hollywood, and it was like just a little breezy, you know, that fall weather. Feeling good. It's so funny because growing up in the Midwest, fall is a very different beast there than it is out here. But it was nice, nonetheless. I'm your host, Ben Moore. Speaking of cozy, I know I'm jumping the gun on this a little bit. It's not quite Thanksgiving time. But I was curious if you have like a favorite family food that you or your relatives would cook and like bring to a family gathering. Any like special Jones or Bloodworth dishes?
It's weird because like it's actually been like a solid 20 years or so since I've been with my family for Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
Been kind of a transplant here and like went to friends' family place for years and years, and then that tradition kind of fizzled out after a while, and then the past few years we've just been doing weird hodgepodge stuff. So like I think last year with COVID, and we were considering doing it again this year. We actually just ordered a Thanksgiving meal from Denny's.
Oh, wow.
I was like, this.
I didn't know Denny's had a Thanksgiving meal. That's
and
interesting.
then there's this local restaurant that somehow I got on their press list just because, you know, we're on press lists.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you sending me things? And for a while it was really annoying. They were sending me stuff like every week. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then today I got a thing that was like, hey, Thanksgiving meals. I'm like, this doesn't sound too bad, actually.
Nice.
So, yeah, I don't know. But I like a good green bean casserole. I think it's a fair
Interesting
pick.
choice. Yeah. I like a green bean casserole. I can get behind that. Brandon?
Shout out to James Kohler, who we used to work with at Game Trailers, who goes to Knott's Berry Farm, which we've talked about a lot recently. Michael Huber gets very excited when you talk about Knott's Berry Farm food. I didn't realize until I started eating a lot of food that Amanda made that my mom was inherently very like rich and creamy in nature, because a lot of the food that I liked a lot of like creamy pastas and stuff like that. So like anything mac and cheese was always a win, but specifically stuffing. That was like my big thing from Thanksgiving that I grew up, where I was just like more. And I would have different people stuffing, and I'd be like, wait a minute. That was one of the only things I'm like, you don't make this like my mom makes. Why wouldn't you make it like my mom makes?
Right. Mashed potatoes for me. I love mashed potatoes so much, and I would go through the family line, and it would be like comical because I would take like half my plate would be mashed potatoes.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah.
like it makes me so happy.
Yeah.
I do have another one that my mom makes that I typically don't get anywhere else. And she'll do it over the holidays as well, but it's just we just call it apple salad. I think it has various names in various cookbooks, but it's got apples and like walnuts or pecans.
That sounds delicious.
And marshmallows and some other stuff in there, and yeah, it's pretty good.
I like
Put some marshmallows in there.
nuts in everything. So delicious. There are people that swear they hate like having nuts in chocolate, like almonds, and I'm like, that's the best way.
All these people sitting down to listen to a 2.5-hour podcast are just like, well, what the... Again,
Listen.
Pause.
This is episode 146.
Go out and buy cashews and then just like, boop, okay.
If you don't know what you're in for, I'm sorry. But let's talk about video games. The main reason why we're here, and actually this is a jam-packed episode.
I'm bursting.
It's contemporary releases, which is always exciting, but it's all over the place too, which is pretty cool.
A lot of great games.
I think it only fair. It's a game that we all have experience with. Blood, I think you have the most experience with Forza Horizon 5, but one that I've been really looking forward to. And Brandon, we were talking a little bit before the show.
Nice.
I guess Blood, since you have more experience with the series than me, because I'm like doubting myself a little bit because I'm playing it and I'm like, this game is amazing. Like, I like just everything. It's like if I was writing a review for this, it would be very hard for me to not just have like maybe the most nitpicky stuff. But other than that, I think this is an incredible game.
Right. Well, yeah, I've definitely been going through that and like trying to figure out like, okay, where are the things? Because because I'm not having that visceral. I'm amazed by this reaction, even though it's obviously clearly very well made. It runs beautifully in performance mode.
Yes.
And I haven't even looked at quality mode yet because it was like it was on
Have
there.
Have you played on PC at all?
My PC's still in the shop.
Oh, okay.
Does
it
it default to performance on Series X?
No, it defaults to quality.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So bump that performance and see the difference. And what was interesting is when I booted it up here for my stream, even though it pulled my settings from the cloud, like quality versus performance is still something you have to do system by system. But anyways, so there's, I'm getting ahead of the review a little bit here, but there are definitely things that I've been, thinking about and wondering about, like where are kind of the holes, and one of them is kind of the harder to communicate things is like, well, when people ask me, it's like, well, what's different about this? And it's like, well, it's in Mexico,
right?
It's like the level of excellence has been there for so long, that it is almost, it's easy to take for granted, and it is easy to feel like, well, it should be this way, And I think though, along that lines, it is really easy to take for granted that, like, this is a huge new map. It is gigantic.
It is gigantic.
It is all new, right? Like when you get a Mario Kart game, right? It's like you get half new tracks and half favorite tracks.
Right.
And you've 16, I want to say, is usually the amount of new tracks. And this is just dozens and dozens of tracks that you maybe a lot of them you'll probably only race on once or twice if you're just trying to fill in everything on the campaign and not really get that deep into multiplayer. But I think one of the other things that really makes it different is the campaign structure, which I have mixed feelings on, because on the one hand, it's really good at letting you just go off, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to just explore, you're going to get points for exploring, and then you're going to get the accolades and the tickets to open up events.
It has to be the most pick up and play friendly game I've encountered in some time, because anything you do, literally anything, in any direction you go, you're making progress with something.
Right.
Yeah. And it's letting you know what that progress is specifically.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it almost feels too easy in that sense. And then, like, I'm like sitting on 7 adventure tickets right now.
Sure.
And I've been so focused on like doing like story and campaign style missions that I haven't even touched like the broad swath of like just normal races, because you go to each part of the map and you're like, okay, now we're unlocking the street scene, now we're unlocking the dirt races now.
Right.
And it's like I unlock one of those things, and then the process of doing those events and a couple of things that catch my eye, well, now I've got a couple more tickets, and like I'll actually just be getting notifications for like 2 or 3 different things at a time when I finish an event. I'm like, okay. So I just keep kind of moving along that campaign path, even though there's tons and tons of other stuff out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure this has been less of a problem with you, because even though I've played other Forza Horizon games, there sometimes like looking at the map, there are just so many icons that I have to like be like, okay, wait, what is this? And I have to go into.
You have to click the filters.
Yeah,
to find
and I'm
things,
like, wait, what does this thing mean specifically? But you mentioned like, oh, hey, now it's set in Mexico, and I think they lean into that so well. Not only is it visually stunning, but like the missions that you're doing, going into ruins and getting some history about what's going on and them talking about the culture. I think from a presentation standpoint, it really is impressive, and it seems like they're actually, it's not just a background. It is a culture that they're leaning into or trying to lean into in a way that I feel like goes beyond other racing games.
Yeah, well, and that's really kind of one of the bigger, again, because I haven't even done that many races. It like at this point, it feels less like a racing game than more like a driving adventure.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of the story missions play into that. I did all of the photo series of quests last night.
Yeah.
And it's this weird, it's like semi-mystical, because you're going around photographing these statues that only appear in these missions during the rain.
Right.
But they're telling you about the story of this adventure, and like I don't know if this is a real person or not. I kind of just like taking the game's word for it. But there is a lot more, I think there is a lot more that you can dive into in that way, to where, you follow these characters and you follow these little story beats, and you can just do that line of events and the adventure tickets and probably kind of have your fill of the game.
Yeah.
And ignore the rest of it. But the one thing I do think, though, is that I do think that even though they're presented well, a lot of times the story missions and the showcase missions, they feel a bit underwhelming to me in terms of gameplay. To where, like with the photo missions, a lot of them, it's just like, all right, drive to this point really quickly and take the photo, and that's it. There's not really a whole lot of thought or challenge, or sometimes you have to sort of like, wind your way through an area.
Right.
And then I mentioned this in the preview, but the showcase events are just comical in the way that they end.
And I can't, your blood's in my head. It's literally like, it's funny to like be going off a jump, just a huge explosion, planes are flying by, and I can just hear Bloodworth being like, whatever, next, it's like, it's exciting, but you're just not, I can't lose this thing. Like,
it's like, even when the idea is really, really cool, like with the monster truck event, there's just, they're way ahead of you, and then everything slows down for you to get just that like inch in front of them at the finish line.
Yeah, I definitely get that complaint. I think I'm just playing it so casually that I think that need to like be, and I'm also playing SMT5, which is extremely tough. So when I take a break from SMT and go into Forza, I think maybe that gentleness is appreciated. But I definitely see where you're coming from. I think my only counter to that is that there is just so much stuff that it's hard for me to get hung up on any particular one thing, because it's like you sitting there and being like, well, this thing is like pretty simple. You just do this and then you're done. And it's like, yes. But then you move on to something else, and it's like, I've already forgotten about that other thing, and then that bleeds into another thing, and then that bleeds into another thing. And if I want, I can jump in online. Like, I can just go into, the Horizon Open, and it's like, okay, well, now I'm playing against real people, and they're way more difficult, and, like, actually putting up a challenge. And all that stuff is pretty seamless.
Yeah. Being seamless is definitely something that really works in its favor.
I like that the economy is really straightforward. I like that. Like, I started out, and then right at the point where I was like, wait, I could probably buy my own car, and just checking like, oh, okay, I got 40 grand. Like, I'll get a convertible. I'm in Mexico. Like, okay, now I have my own car, but then I can, be upgrading this and getting more money, leveling it up and everything. But I could see like, okay, that's 1.5 mil. Like, I can maybe set that as a goal, or maybe like when I break 6 figures, then I'll buy another car and just slowly, get my way up there.
Right. But they hand out cars like candy so much.
I just said that to them before we were recording. They throw them at you. Yeah, it's awesome. And it's one thing to like get some. The last racing game I played was Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
And so it's funny to get like some thing that looks like a dinosaur, and like in this game, it's like, oh, this is a very fun automobile. Thank you very much. I can look at it, and it's just like glowing in the Mexico sunlight. Very pretty game. Each one of those feels very valuable when you get a new car.
Also, when a storm comes in, it's just so visually cool.
Yeah.
Have you seen storms in the open world? Because I've only seen them in the events where like you're going to drive
only
into
in the
a storm.
events so far. Yeah, I have not seen it in the open world.
Yeah, because I feel like I've seen rain, but I haven't seen the dust storm just naturally happen, and I haven't seen the thunderstorm naturally happen. It's only been in those events, and I feel like that's a little bit disappointing to me as well, because when you drive into the dust storm, like the guys next to you are like, they're freaking out, oh, this is awesome and stuff, and then like, and I get in there and it's like, well, I don't feel like the wind pushing against my car in any discernible way. I don't see like a lot of crazy stuff flying by or just like sand getting in my face. It's just like, well, the sky's brown now.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's like, it's things like that where it's like things like on a surface level, they're cool, but they're just not quite as cool, as fun as I would want them to be, as impactful to me. Yeah.
And do you think that's just because you are so familiar with like 4 and 3 that it feels more iterative? Because I feel like as somebody who is less familiar diving into it, I think like on a raw fundamental level, right? And this goes beyond Forza Horizon. This extends to all of Forza. But just because it's not like my genre, right? even just the basic act of driving feels so finely tuned, and like the way the triggers are vibrating as I'm turning corners, or how good like it feels, or how noticeable different types of terrain are depending on the type that I'm driving in. Like these are all things that are super not new to Forza in any stretch of the imagination, but I think they're still relatively new to me, that like I'm still kind of in that wow period of this legacy. I think that
how smart the map is built. You know?
Yeah.
Sure.
How fluid the streets like blend together, like how exciting the locations look.
You know, I mean, and that's one of my favorite things is the bonus boards. You know, and in this, there's like some of them are just placed so diabolically.
Yeah.
You know, I saw one on the balcony of this high rise, and when I finally figured it out, it's like, all right, I'm putting this clip on Twitter because this is ridiculous. But yeah, I think part of my familiarity with Forza definitely plays into that, since I have played this entire Horizon series, and it still is like one of my favorite racing series. But yeah, I think there is something to be said of like, I want these cool things to be more than just a visual wrapper over what otherwise would still be exactly the same kind of point-to-point race.
Sure.
You know, and like I had wind affecting me in F-Zero on the Super NES, you know, in like 92 or 91. And so it's like, I know you can do it. I know you can have cars push around or trees fall over or whatever, might happen. But I think, kind of making that work in their open world structure maybe is part of it. I'm not sure.
Sure.
And there's been like a lot of great games that have done cool things with rain effects, like F1 and Project Cars. So there's definitely, I feel like, a little bit of something to be desired there from gameplay. And then I think difficulty and challenge is also this kind of double-edged sword, because on the one hand, there is all kinds of room to tweak and customize the game to your liking. There's a lot of different levels to the AI skill level.
And they reward you for experimenting with that stuff.
They reward you for experimenting with turning off different assists like Forza has always done. But it really takes you getting in there and working with that, right? Because otherwise, like you said, if you're just doing the races and not thinking about it, it's like, might not bother you that you pass everybody in the first 30 seconds. So that's fine.
Right.
And then after enough races, it will say, hey, do you want to bump it up?
Yeah.
But I feel like with this one, because there's so much more story events, that doesn't happen as quickly unless you're specifically doing the race events.
Yeah, and maybe it was just because of I did a couple of race events in a row, but it was it to me it felt pretty quick. They were like, hey, like bump it up. Like you'll get more credits. Like you put, try it at least one thing up. And I was like, I'm just chill. Like I'm not gonna, I love challenging games, but it was just this, like, it was so relaxing. I was just like, I'm just enjoying looking at this game. Like it's a very almost passive experience, but rolling that into a question, I feel like just visually and in terms of raw number of things to do and in terms of accessibility, this is a game that I could recommend to anyone. And I think like literally anyone could have a good time with it. Especially with people that maybe are estranged from the genre, or like maybe even have like fond memories of like Burnout Paradise. I think there's a lot of comparisons that you can make there.
Yeah, have you done any of the arcade events, the little temporary events that pop up?
Okay, so I've actually had some technical difficulties with Forza Horizon 5.
Okay.
You're hitting on it exactly, because I have this. When I first played the game, I saw it's Horizon Arcade, right? That's what it's called. I saw that on the map, but I didn't do it. And then I turned it back on, and it was like, hey, dude, do a Horizon Arcade event. It was like giving me this prompt that wouldn't go away. And I just like wanted it to go away, but a Horizon Arcade event wouldn't appear. And I was like, and it kept disconnecting me from online. I'm like, is it because of my privacy settings on Xbox?
No, they were having some disconnection issues. They say they've addressed without.
Okay.
Yeah.
I changed some stuff around and it seemed smoother, but I haven't gotten a notification for a Horizon Arcade event, so I don't know how rare those are. But that little box is like, do the Horizon Arcade. I'm like, I can't. It's not there.
Yeah. Two things maybe. One, I've noticed sometimes that if if it's in rest mode or suspend mode, it doesn't always necessarily connect you to Horizon Life, the online,
I was definitely having troubles
sometimes
connecting
you just have to
Horizon
reboot
Life.
the game and then it'll connect. But then the other thing is, in general, I don't see that pop up for Horizon Arcade. Like I kind of have to look at the map and see are there any, and even on the stream, it's just kind of things I wanted to show people, but I would see them and then they would be 15 seconds from starting and I'm on the other side of the map. It's not going to make it. The one thing that will help is there is each one of the different houses that you buy. Save your credits from getting cars. Buy the houses first because one of the houses allows you to fast travel to any road on the map.
Oh.
Whereas when you first start, fast travel is limited to houses and Horizon outposts.
It's so funny because that thought popped up in my head while I was playing. I was like, oh, I wonder if I could fast travel there. And then I immediately forgot about it because it's just too much fun to drive around.
Right. And that's part of it too. Almost like a Castlevania game or something where it's you want to fill out all of those roads and you look and okay, I haven't even been any of that stuff at all. There's even for me, there's still some pretty broad spaces where I've always just gone that way for whatever reason. So I need to go check that out.
But back to the question, because I think this is a game that really does have a lot of universal appeal, do you think maybe for somebody like you that is a hindrance where you're okay, I've been with this series from the beginning, I just want it to surprise me a little bit more or challenge me a little bit more, right? Do you think that accessibility comes at a cost, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean it's weird because that accessibility, that do whatever you want, it's again there's that double-edged sword where everybody can have very different experiences in this game. If you like to just paint cars and trade designs with people, you can do that and you can get rewarded for it. If you don't want to deal with that, then when you go to the auto show, you look through the top things that are there, and if you like one, you pick it. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
Same thing with tuning. Tuning is just arcane art to me. But if I can go and see some tunes that people have done, and all right, well, that'll boost my stats up to max out the car in this level, then sure, I'll do that. But at the same time, kind of going back to sort of the opposite, the very distinct tracks of Mario Kart. When you say Baby Park, people know what that is. And I don't know that there is a Forza Horizon 5 track that will ever be a Baby Park to somebody. As good as all of these tracks are, as many cool parts there are, maybe the switchbacks up the side of the volcano or something like that. Those will stand out. Some locations will stand out. But in terms of an actual race, there's just so many different options. There's so many different ways people can go.
Yeah. It's interesting because tomorrow night we're going to be group streaming Horizon 5, and it's something that I definitely push for. But now that I have experience with the game, I am so pumped for this group streaming because I've been thinking about how much fun I've just been having in this game on my own, and I know that with you guys, it's there's just something about it feels impossible to not have some amount of fun with it, you know. And I feel I've honestly just been treating this game as kind of a cool down game. It's late, I'm done with everything else, I'm just gonna play an hour of Horizon 5, and it's the best cool down game I could ask for. It fits that need perfectly, and it's funny that it's with the rise of Game Pass and it being on Game Pass, it's the perfect Game Pass game. It really is. And it's funny because I never have racing games as one of my favorite games of the year, but I would not be surprised. I haven't done the actual banging out of the list, but it's just a game that it's just a blast. Yeah. It's just a good time.
And I haven't even touched the playground games yet. Those are usually really good. Playing capture the flag and zombies and stuff with people. And
that's another reason I'm excited to do the group. You're gonna tell me all the cool stuff. You're gonna maximize that fun. I'm already having unfocused fun.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it way better. Go ahead.
As a father of a 2-year-old, it's nice to have a game, be playing a card game like this. He'll come in and I'm just like, please come in.
Yes.
Like, I don't have to just quickly turn off the television. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like had to do that through all the month of October. I was just like, oh, I'm decapitating somebody. Hold on a second. He just like came in and I was like doing podcast work and he was like, race cars. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, trust me, Daddy would love to race cars right now. That'd be so much fun.
Oh, that's so wholesome.
But, and just wondering, like the one thing I have to say about Forza Horizon 5 is this game just makes me wonder if I'm missing out on other games on PlayStation 5 and Series X that look like this game looks. This game is just astounding. Like it just, we'll talk about Riders Republic and other games I've been playing, even like Hot Wheels Unleashed, like other games. I'm just like, this game looks really nice. And then get to this, like, okay, never mind. This is clearly like at least another tier that I'm just not currently playing on a regular basis.
Well, it's one thing to have the game look as good as it does, but oftentimes when I run into this category of game that looks this good, it's like, there's the frame rate dip, there's the frame rate dip. And then it gets in my head, and it's like, I can't unsee it. And it's like, Horizon 5 has been so rock solid. It's like the furthest thing from my mind. Like, it just runs beautifully. Like, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. The other thing that kind of came up last night, and it's more of a wish list thing than a criticism. But in terms of being familiar, the playlists, they do a really good job with curating the music, and they have like, kind of like GTA, they have like 5 or 6 different radio stations.
I'm actually pretty disappointed in the radio.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah, and it's probably just my own particular taste, but a lot of times, like, I'll do a cycle through the radio, and I'm like, I don't want to listen to any of this songs.
But the thing is, like, they've had kind of the same stations and DJs for several games.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And just I saw Janet Garcia tweeted that like she had turned off the in-game music and was just like created a banda playlist on Spotify and was just listening to that. Yeah. But it just made me realize that, like, oh my gosh, that would be so perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Is if every place that they went to with this Horizon series is if one of the stations was a local DJ that curated their own playlist and they just figured out the rights for whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And you were actually listening to the kinds of things you would be hearing on the radio if you turn the radio on in that country.
Yeah,
because like if they go to Japan, I don't want to be listening to Killers and Beastie Boys again,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They should go to Japan. Something that I saw on the map that I haven't checked out yet is the Eliminator to the Battle Royale.
Yeah.
How is that?
I did a little bit of that in the multiplayer session for the review. And they introduced that a year-ish after Horizon 4.
Yeah.
And so, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. It's essentially a car battle royale. And so what you do is that you drop in there. Everyone drops in there with the same like base level car. And then you have to look around for these car drops, right? So there's like purple smoke that's shooting up. And then when you find a car drop, it could be, so you start on like level 1, and then they like rank up to like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So you could get lucky and find, like something that's 3 levels above you, or you could find something that's like, oh, I'm a level 3 and this is a level 2 or whatever. But then when you see somebody else, you can challenge them. And then you have this point-to-point race, and then whoever makes it to the finish line first, they win. They get to either get that other person's car or boost their own car up a level, and then the other person is knocked out. That's the Eliminator. That's the Battle Royale aspect. And then once it gets down to, I think, the last 10 people or something like that, then there's just like one final race, and winner takes all. But there's a little bit of strategy in that to where if you do have a good car, then you can kind of camp out by one of the car drops and wait for somebody to come along and then challenge them before they're ready for it, and then just just one of the differences now is when Eliminator came out on 4, everybody was already very familiar with that map, and knew where to go and how to get around. Yeah. Now that like everyone's on the same page. We're all running into lava rocks, and
Yeah, I was saying, if you get a really good car and then just run right into a wall, and stay there, then it's just like somebody's going to beat you to it anyway.
Yeah, and that's what the developers are saying. It's like, never give up because you never know when somebody's going to hit a tree.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I'm very excited just because it's been a long time coming. I've been looking forward to this game for literally years. It was announced in 2017 at the unveiling of the Switch, the official unveiling, Shin Megami Tensei V. And I think the first thing I want to say, I'm going to, like you were mentioning, Blood, I'm definitely taking this from my review, but I am amazed that this game exists. I really am, because I think this is the epitome of a game that is not for everyone. Like it's the inverse of Horizon 5, where like I love it. I have no idea, unless I knew you very, very well, if you were going to like it, because it's a very specific type of game, but how heavily it leans into that and how well it executes on those ideas, I think is just so commendable. I feel like we see so many series and so many games get watered down, and to have something that feels like it has a niche but kind of singular vision, I think is so cool. And it's been really frustrating. I've been purposely, of course, as I'm going through the review process, avoiding other reviews, but I'm seeing mainstream outlets be like, well, it's not as likable as Persona, and it's just like, this is just hurting my soul on multiple levels. Like, I understand that Persona 5 was this huge, unmitigated success, and it really, like, introduced a lot of new people to Persona, and that's super cool, but seeing that new wave not be familiar with Shin Megami Tensei and not really realize that it was spun off, Persona was spun off from SMT, and that SMT is trying to accomplish very different things than something like Persona is trying to accomplish. It's just like a weird moment. Like, I feel like the old man with the cane, a little bit like, no, you don't understand. But all of that out of the way, right? Like, I've played through Shin Megami Tensei 4. I've played through Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne recently when the HD remaster came out. And those games, especially Nocturne, are kind of well known for how difficult they are, right? And so I've plenty of experience with SMT. I knew that going in. I was hoping for that. And even with all of that experience, all of that time, this has to be one of the most brutal RPGs I've ever played. Like, just today, I got caught off guard by an enemy. They got to act like 4 times in a row. My main character died, and I was like, wait, I think, is that like just an hour of, I think that might just be like an hour of progress gone. I didn't time it out exactly. I don't know how much it was, but it was significant. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. Most bosses in this game feel like a final boss in any other game. I mean, it is like, you're like, I've leveled up, I've prepared, I've done everything correctly, and it's still butt clenching. It's just like, you like, I've constantly had those moments where it's like, okay, it's low on health, I'm just gonna go for it to try to kill it. And it never, ever lets you rest on your laurels. It's like, when it warns you that a big fight is coming up, that's not just, they're not kidding around. It's not just like, they're not trying to like trick you into thinking that a really dangerous fight is coming up ahead. Like, it matches the level of intensity that the story is presenting every step of the way. And that is exciting. I think a lot of people are going to get frustrated. I think a lot of people are going to quit. But if you love RPGs and you love combat systems like I do, being forced, like really the game grabbing you and being like, are you sure about this? With every decision that you make, and there are so many decisions, like, it's every single aspect of your character and the demons that you're using to fight with you feels essential. It's like, you got to look at your whole roster, and it's like, okay, what is everyone's weakness? What is everyone's strengths? What are their spells here? They can only hold this many spells. When I level up, I'm going to get a new spell, and I can think of a situation where that would be really useful, but all the spells that I have on this guy are already useful, so which one do I give up?
Like
right?
Pokemon,
and so you have to constantly you make genuine sacrifices, and you don't always have all the answers, and so you just have to try to plan and strategize as best you can. And so when you pull it off, when you do feel like you're prepared, when you do think ahead and you make the right decisions, it feels incredible. But all of this stuff that I'm saying, right, like this is all pretty normal SMT stuff, right? Like these are positive qualities that I think have endeared people to this series for a very long time. What separates SMT 5 is how much of an exploration game that it is. And that's not what I mean, when I did the preview, obviously I saw that, but before having hands-on experience of the game, that's not what I was expecting. So the maps that you're in, the areas that you go to you're in a destroyed Tokyo, right? And they really take advantage of that by having like all of this sand come in, and so it changes the elevation of everything. You have to, there are these crumbled buildings that you're literally jumping through. There's like trains that are turned over that you have to run across. Like you are doing like as much platforming as you are fighting, and you're doing a hell of a lot of fighting. And it's not just like, because sometimes I feel like JRPGs will be like, oh, there's a chest up there, I'm going to climb up these vines, or like jump to this thing.
Well, yeah, even in Persona 5, they introduced a little bit of that with jumping across the chandeliers and all that kind of thing,
Right, and so it's definitely something that has existed. This is way, way, way beyond that, right? Where you'll have moments where it's like, how do I get to that thing? And you'll have to do precision platforming. It's not like a prompt comes up and you hit it and it automatically does it. Like you actually have to make the jump. And it's really fun. Like it starts out pretty simple, but as you get further and further in the game, you'll have these, like I've had so many moments where just like uncovering the map and trying to get these treasures is like one of the most fun things about it. And I won't, like, I'll have times where I'm like, how do I get there? And I think I'll know it, and I'll run, and it's like, oh no, I have to go over here, I have to go under this. And it's just like really intricate and fun. And I feel like SMT, like as a broader umbrella series, has kind of struggled with having dungeons that are like just annoying in how mean they are. Like, it's like, Nocturne specifically, I'm thinking like, okay, like if you walk down this path, all the tiles will just do damage over time. And so it's just like that kind of like brutal cruelness that you're like, okay, how much damage did I take? Oh, I'm almost dead. I gotta heal it up. And like that kind of thing, or having like a bunch of crazy portals or something where it's like, oh, I go in here. Where does that take me? Now I'm over here. Just kind of things that like are hard, but also kind of aggravating. This is fun. This is like, oh, I need to get up this mountain. Like, where's the path that leads to that? And I think a huge part of why it's fun is because it's really well designed. These aren't just like tile-based places that you're going through. They feel like real physical locations, but also because you're not dealing with random encounters. So any demon that you want to get in a fight with, for the most part, you will see there are some demons that will just pop out of nowhere. But for the most part, you see them on the map. And so you're like, okay, I know that threat is there. And you're so mobile, you can dash as much as you want. You can constantly jump. And it's like, okay, they might try to come after me, but I can't avoid them. And so if you want to get into that mindset of, I don't really want to fight, I just want to explore, you can do that and have that be a satisfying venture on its own. And of course, there's still a risk, right? Like they can still come and get you and attack you. But I think taking out the random encounters and the way that they present them is super important. But on top of that, because the game is so difficult, you need every advantage that you can get. And what I love about this game, and I do not get this feeling almost ever in games, and it drives me up a wall. Like, a lot of times I do side quests in games just because, like, maybe I want to hear the story, right? Or I just get into that completionist mindset. I would say, like, those are the two driving factors for doing side quests in games. I do side quests in Shin Megami Tensei V because you need the experience and the items and the demons that it will give you. And you'll get something and be like, oh my God, this will help me out so much. And the same is true of even the most basic chests. Like, I'm going and I'm combing every, nook and cranny of the map because it's like, no, I need, like, you have to give this to me. And I think that need is really, like, I'm not just doing things to check them off the list. I'm doing them because the game is making them worthwhile. And I think that, like, everything feeds into everything else. Like, I'm so impressed by this game's design in the sense that, like, no matter what I'm doing or no matter what decision I have to make, it feels important. It feels valuable.
Right.
And I think that's so cool.
Whereas, like, when I was playing something like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it was like, I'm just gorging myself at this point.
Right.
You know, like, I don't need to do more. It's like another area to go conquer.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
how many games where you pick up like 100 weapons? They're like, all right, I guess I'll just sell this for the money I don't need. Yeah.
Right. And the flip side of that, I think the other thing that you run into with kind of, optional content in games is if you get in that completionist mindset, you do the optional content and then you get to the main quest and you're like, well, I just sneeze on it and I beat it. Right? No, not true here.
Right.
Not true here. It really, like, it's not just about grinding. It's not just about doing every side quest. Like, even with those things, even doing those things, right? If you're making bad decisions, you will die. And I think that is the other thing that makes it so much fun. Is it's like, this is going to be rewarding regardless of how you're playing.
Yeah, now grinding is something I think I've seen flash through the conversation on this game. Do you feel like grinding is something you have to, like, stop and go out of your way to do? Or do you think that if you are exploring and doing side quests along the way, it mitigates the need for having to do that?
It's a great question, and it's a question that I don't know how accurately I can answer it, because I do grind, and I have grinded in SMT5, but the reason that I grind is, like, the way that it's set up is, like, let's say you fight a boss, right, and the boss kicks your ass. You're like, oh, okay, in the next level or in 2 levels, I can fuse this new demon will...
There's actually a goal there and not just a level up.
Right, and because, like, the leveling up is important. Boosting your stats is important, but what's so interesting is, like, your main protagonist that you play, he doesn't get skills as he levels up. You have to go out there and you have to explore and you have to collect these things called essences, and then you can either fuse... The essences have their own skills and affinities to them, and if you fuse them into him, that's how he gets new abilities. So you have to go out there and find that stuff. And so, like, grinding just in terms of overpowering your enemy won't really do it. It's like you said, I think you phrased it perfectly. I have this goal, I want this new demon. This new demon comes with its own tool set that will help me deal with this particular problem. And so that has been really, really interesting. And I think the other thing that is interesting is just as I'm going on, the types of challenges that I'm dealing with are pretty satisfying in their own way, where the game kind of starts out and it's just like, okay, do you know how the press turn system works? Do you know how to take advantage of that? Do you know how to do sufficient damage? Like, are you being smart? Like, do you know when you should have everybody guard? And now it's like, okay, now you're running into bosses where there's like 4 or 5 people, and one of those people can heal the others up to full. So you have to be like, okay, I need to do, like, threat assessment. It's like, which order do I take these things out at? And it's just like, make no mistake, you are fighting in this game all the time. And I feel like I've kind of seen the sentiment of, like, oh man, I want to be with my high school friends talking. It's like, that's not really what this is. It is. Right. It is very. It's like
demons, man.
Oh, that's something that I wasn't entirely clear on because I saw a little bit of that in your preview.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, then Tokyo gets destroyed. It's like, well, so is that an element past the intro, or how does that play into things?
Right. So I want to be very careful here because I don't want to spoil anything for people. And there certainly is a high school element, but just because there's a high school element, it doesn't mean it's Persona, right? You're not going to basketball practice, right? It is just your character happens to be a high schooler and you're dealing with other high schoolers, and they do have high school problems that they're going through, but the way that it's presented is very different than like a Persona. And a hallmark of mainline SMT is Togi always gets destroyed, right? Like, it's kind of a thing, it's just like, they kind of take that fundamental concept of Tokyo gets destroyed, angels and demons are fighting, you have these different forces with these different ideologies kind of racing to get into power. And the same is true here. Like all those hallmarks are still present, but the twist is, who do you side with and what shape do those forces take in this iteration? Now, it was funny because I think it was on a stream. Somebody said, like, I was like, oh, I don't want anything to be spoiled for me for SMT5. I was like, please don't say anything. And they were like, as a joke, they're like, Ben, Tokyo gets destroyed, because that always happens. But what I will say is there is a twist. There is an element to this particular entry where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of different. And so it was not necessarily what I expected. And although the character moments are not nearly as focused in on in something like a Persona, I think there have been moments between characters or things that have happened to characters where I'm like, oh, damn, like that I wasn't expecting that to happen. Like the way that you were positioning this character, I wasn't expecting that particular thing. And I think part of that is, like, you look at Persona 5, and Persona 5 absolutely deals with heavy material, for sure. Real-world, relatable things that people go through. But at the end of the day, its solution to that is by forming bonds with people, by having the power of friendship, we can overcome things, right? Which is a totally fine message. But Shin Megami Tensei is like... sometimes really bad things happen, and that's it. It's a much more blunt and nihilistic take on a dystopia. I would say there is not necessarily a uniting together moment at the end of it, and I think it makes it a very interesting counterpart to something like a Persona. Again, I don't think it's something that everybody's going to be into, but its bleakness, I think, is just so uncommon that it's very refreshing in a way. Yeah. But yeah, it's so hard because there are different difficulty options, right? So if, like, you're hearing me talk and you're like, wow, that sounds too much for me, but I'm kind of curious about this game, I want to get it and I want to play on easy or whatever. It's like, I get it, and I don't think that's wrong. Absolutely play how you want to play. I 100% believe that. But I feel like the challenge is so essential to everything that this game is trying to do. Like, all of the systems and how well they're all thought out and how integral they are to each other, as well as the bleakness of the story. I feel like if you don't have that challenge, you're not really getting the intended message in a way. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but it's a difficult problem to solve because like, I want this game to do well. I want it to succeed, but I could totally understand people being scared off.
But I want it to burn people.
Yeah. But I think through that challenge, right? Like, you feel this, like, almost kindred relationship with it, where it's like, listen, this isn't just another game that you play and then forget about a week later. It's like some of these fights that I've been through, it's like, I'll never forget this, And so I think that's the trade-off. Brandon, you were hitting at this earlier, Riders Republic.
Yeah. I've been playing a bunch of this game. I've been excited about this game. I was curious about it. I remember, like, seeing the first shot where they showed what are called mass races. It's one of the few things you actually do in the game against a real person. You can identify real people on the map, but this is like, the game will yell at you no matter what you're doing. Mass race in 4 minutes, go. And then everybody, like, teams up, and it's so funny to listen to because it's just clink, 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 clink. And, like, the positions changing, like, your position relative to other people is just, like, sounds like a casino. And I remember seeing that in the original trailer being like, cool. The steep people are doing bikes, and it looks like, jetpacks and stuff. And, like, that's fun to kind of put them all together, but I don't know if it'll be that fun. There's got to be some catch. And they did a pretty good job. They, in my years of reviewing games, the progress from steep to Riders Republic is rare in terms of like what I've experienced. And I don't know Ubisoft Annecy if like you can really tell like everything they've done before. I looked and there was just like mostly Riders Republic. Like I don't know if they've worked on other projects just because it's like such an advancement from the last game, which I also reviewed.
It's funny that you bring up Steep because you know me, like I'll pretty much jump. It's very easy for me to get excited about a game, but Steep was one of those games where I'm like, I have no interest in this. Like this just looks. I feel like unless you're really into the concept of a snowboarding video game, just the vibe was very bland. Whereas I feel like Riders Republic, from a visual perspective, and of course, it has a lot more variety, but it's just more attention grabbing.
Mm-hmm. This is the SSX spiritual successor that I've been waiting on. It's not quite, ringing all of those bells. Never gonna get my tricky tricks ever again. You can hold the snowboard out, but I can't let it go. I can't do flips with it. Like spin it on one finger. But darn, this game is fun. I just it's one of those games you're reviewing and you're like, yeah, I can nitpick and I'll look at the stuff you brought up with Forza. I can go on and on about like all sorts of weird, glitchy things that happen. But I don't recall getting frustrated with this game. I don't recall ever like something would happen or like if I ever got frustrated with the track, it's just because I was going too darn fast. Like it's almost always the solution to everything. And as an open world nut, it's just so freeing and so open and welcoming and has in a lot of ways what you were talking with Forza, it's just constantly like here's new stuff, here's new in the way that Forza hands out cars. One thing that's really fun is they have these things called Shack Daddy events, which are like the crazy guys, like the
Shack
Animal House,
Daddy.
The Shack Daddy crew. Even though none of them are named, there's no like main Shack Daddy guys. It's a bunch of weirdos, like in costumes. Like there's the guy with the rubber ducky around his waist. I guess that's like the protagonist of the Shack Daddies. I'm not sure. But those events are really fun because they'll unlock like a crazy bike or a funny outfit or something. And there are landmarks that you can find on the map. The whole thing is a bunch of national parks jammed together, which I was like, what a funny way to honor all of these wonderful locations that I hold so dear because they're all in the U.S., but also kind of like bastardizing them at the same time because it's just like you're in Mammoth and you're like, what? There's not. The Canyonlands isn't
I'm
right
sure
there.
That
like,
anyone from Mexico is looking at Forza Horizon 5 the same way.
It's like
they stick a name on something that you recognize and like, oh, really? Like, okay.
And then the way they talk about it, they're like, we've been here for years. And I remember the original people that rode this mountain. I'm like, well, this mountain when it was next to Mammoth or this mountain in real life? It gets a little confusing. But you can go to landmarks, you get experience for them. You can actually see these places, and the descriptions for them I adore because I love going to national parks. I love hiking, I love camping, and a lot of them talk about parking and the lines for the bathrooms. And like if this looks cool and you're inspired by this game, don't hike here because people have died. It's really serious. They're like, this looks neat, enjoy it in the game, or this looks cool and it's very accessible, but parking's a nightmare. And it's got a really fun attitude. I hated the attitude in Steep, and I hate the attitude in Riders Republic, just from the dialogue, from the characters and stuff.
Yeah, in the little that I've played, the dialogue has seemed...
That's it. That's most of it, just right at the beginning.
Okay, yeah, in the beginning it was rough.
But there's a ton of it. And they throw these two characters at you that you just talk to the whole time, and it's just like, it's so weird to see like the cover and just like people all over the place and like all the art's just like at least 15 people in every shot. And there are two characters like throughout the entire game. What's up? This is the guy calling you back. And I'm just like, man, it'd be great. Even SSX, which doesn't have a lot of like NPCs, there are all the other characters that you can play as. And so this game has a ton of personality and is soulless at the same time. It's really, it's a very strange mix. Or at least these two characters they try to establish, it just like wipe out of my mind. And I think of all my favorites, like actual sports stories, like the Dogstown and Dogtown, right? Yeah, the Z-Boys. And like, when like early snowboarders, Tony Hawk, and like how all these things actually like really came to fruition. And it's kind of what they're going for in Riders Republic. And it's like, you're not even doing a bad attempt at this. It's just, you're like pretending you're kind of doing it. But I can't help but, it's kind of like how you feel with Forza, where you're like, I can't help but think it'd be neat if I had like a whole cast of weirdos that were just jumping on the radio stations, or I would just meet at different events. They're like, here's a whole new discipline. I'm like, be dope if there was a person to go with it, that would talk. Even like bad, like Need for Speed games have had like, I'm street racing guy, And so it's like, it's really, really missing that, only because it's trying to do it at the same time. Like if you wouldn't shut up, I wouldn't think you should have a better script. You know, like if I just came in and they were like, whatever, extreme sports, national parks, go have fun, then like I wouldn't bat an eye. But because they're yelling at me so much, it's like, do this better.
It's weird because I feel like it clashes with so much of the rest of the game, because once you do get away from that stuff, it really feels like so little is in your way, right?
Right. I mean, you can fly in this game. You fly. They give you a jetpack after a couple hours of the game, and you hit the L1 button, and you go flying into the air. And I love that even when you pick a location and zoom back to the map, the moment it starts the animation of going into the map, you can hit L1 and it'll register that you've taken off. So by the time you get to your character, he's already like, I'm already
nice.
like flying up in the air. And that's like that's why this game I think is fantastic. Is it works? It runs really well. I've never kind of run into weird issues, and when I have, there's just kind of like an insanity to the whole thing. So like it works, you know, like I don't mind doing a race over. I don't mind restarting. I don't mind rewinding the cam, which is so funny in Forza Blood, because in this game it's very like glitchy and remix when you like try to rewind, and in Forza it's so elegant. It's just like life itself just starts to go backwards. It's, and especially the mass races, it's like I think the best I've done is like 8th. And I like screamed. I was so excited. I'm like, like I wasn't expecting to break the 20s, and like I got 8th. Like, so it's just fun to earn new things, fun to get more stars. It reminds me of kind of like, I don't remember if the crew did this, but it reminded me of like Super Mario Odyssey, where it's like you get credits at like 20% of the game, and then there's like so much of it left if you really want to dig in. And like you get the participation award for like everything. If you just show up and do it, you're done. And it'll star, you did it. And then there's like, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stars sometimes that you can also earn from the event if you like hit all the balloons, or and some of those I'll just magically do. They're like, do a very specific trick, and I'm like, oh, I did it. I'm like, oh cool, thanks. Like, and so like I'm at the stage now when I'm writing the review script where it's like I could go back and spend as much time, if not more, than I just did if I really want to nitpick and do that stuff. It's neat. I have my favorites, but at the same time, there's a bunch of stuff I've also unlocked that I'm like, the rocket bite's cool, but it doesn't beat the rocket skis. So I'm just going to use those. Where have those been all my life? Just skis that you just go up the mountain.
Nice.
Or like some races, you can make your own races. And so I'm also at that point where it's like, I can just go into the user created content and see all the stuff people have made.
Yeah, that's another thing I haven't even touched is the event lab in Forza.
Kind of caught Halloween just right at the tail end, So I was playing all these other Halloween games, and then started to realize like, oh no, I bet they're doing an event, and they had all these cool unlocks, and like the Scarecrow's still in the shop. It's just, and it's a real place. Like all these places are cool. You can visit them. It's a lot of them are like Yosemite's one, which is just like, one of the OG national parks, one of my favorite places to exist in the world. It's like one of the reasons I love California so much. So I've just been like, it's almost like a somber experience going to write the review, because you're like, well, I should probably start playing now. Just like type, because very, very fun. So much fun. I don't even know how cross save works. I've been playing on PS5. A little confusing, Ubisoft. They gave me all this preview stuff on PC. And they're like, here's your PS5 review code. And then I started over and like had to make a new character, even though it was like the same Ubisoft account. So when I go back to PC, I hope it carries over. If not, fine. Like, I'm totally fine starting over on our Epic accounts. Huber really wants to play. He was like, we got to make like a faction. And I know he probably won't have time to play until next year.
Yeah.
One of those games where it's like, easily, all they got to do is just whisper like, hey, we added this new couple of races. And it's like, I will easily boot this game up and jump back in and play. Store is super weird. There's not a lot going on. I like jumped in and was like, everyone in these bike races wearing a white shirt. I want to get a blue shirt. And they're like, here's your outfit of the day. You got 20 grand of the currency you can earn. I'm like, I don't. That's it. And I'm like, I can understand if there's a lot of things you're showing me that I can't buy that I need to buy.
It kind of reminds me of Fall Guys the way you describe it, because like you always have that like daily timer. It's like, well, if you get 4 crowns, you can get this thing. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna win that many times a day. Thanks.
Like a blue long sleeve, I didn't think would be impossible to get. Like a bad, banged up leather jacket, I don't think would be too tough.
Well, and you would think that the way the game's presenting itself, it
was kind of like Animal Crossing, where it's like you go to the store and they're like, I knew you want that table, but you got to wait a little bit. So now after like 2 weeks after launch, and because I love this, you can pick your costume for 6 different things. So it's snow trick, snow race, bike tricks, bike race, air.
Oh, so it just automatically changes based on what you're doing.
Whenever you switch to that event, you're wearing that thing.
Cool.
And just like odds and ends. So when I go on my rocket skis, I have like my brown hoodie and I mostly like those outfits, but I would just love it. Give me a new pair of boots, man. You know, like where's my cowboy hat at? You know, there's not a lot of options.
Have you gotten the leather hat in Horizon yet?
No, I'm looking for that too.
There's like it's tied to one of the story,
of the expedition things. Yeah. Well, all right, I have that to look forward to.
Jones,
nitpicky stuff.
Jumped into, I don't know if it was the trial or beta or whatever it was for Rise Republic. Like I really had no expectations for it. I wasn't going. This wasn't a game I was excited about. I just downloaded it because it was there, and I remember going like, "Whoa, like this is fun. Like I would totally play this." And it's so weird because I had a much stronger positive impression towards the very little time that I spent with Riders of the Republic than I expected. But now I have Forza, and I feel like it is taking, like, I think Riders is really fun. I just think Forza is better.
It is. No, there's no question.
So it's like
dude, the visuals alone. That's partly why the visuals in Forza are so like, you know, like it's like putting my glasses a little closer to my head, like, you know, like, holy cow, this is a good looking game.
Yeah.
And it was funny because Forza will affect my Riders. I don't know if it'll affect the score, but it's like I'm certainly going back to Riders being like, okay, you know, because I was squinting at the environment at the horizon, and I'm like, okay, the map's pretty big, and it's a bummer that the desert just kind of becomes snow, but you know, like maybe I'm being too critical. It runs really well, and then I play Forza, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
Like it's clear that there are things you can achieve in an open world visual fidelity. Like those are Forza trees, and they're Riders trees,
and like, you know, this game is not going anywhere. I could still play it, you know, months from now or whatever.
Or can you? You can jump, but you can't fly.
Yeah, you can get on some pretty crazy jumps, but nothing.
But yeah, it's just like I can't remember the last time I had another game just like take the place of another good game.
What Forza? Yeah, it's from a strict race perspective. There's also that, but like what I haven't really talked about again, I like just mentioned SSX and try to as much as possible in all of Easy Allies content. I try to be SMT, SSX.
Somebody making an SSX.
We're both doing what we can. If I could talk about SSX on Frame Trap, I would. But there are no SSX games. The tricks, man. It took me a while to understand, like, oh, okay, like AB is a short trick, but XB is a little longer trick. All right, and like, because when you add grabs to it, it's like, are you upside down? I don't know. You know, like it's kind of crazy to look at. When I really started to get in that groove, because I remember in the preview event, I was like, these modes of the trick stuff that they do are great. I just suck at it right now, so it's kind of frustrating because I get up in the air and I don't know what I'm going to do before I land. And like once I finally got that groove, it's like, oh, I've missed this so much. Like I've really missed just that fear of like, and on bikes too. Weird going from steep, and then you get into this game, first thing, bike. You know, they're like the first thing you ever do. You know, here's your bike, flip it. I'm like, whoa, I haven't done this since the PS2. This is crazy. Like,
the bikes are the thing that I'm most interested in checking.
Grinding on stuff, seeing collectibles and weird stuff. But I don't know if I've run my allotted time for Riders Republic because I need to talk about what might be the greatest thing in this video game. What literally just makes the entire thing work. They have ghosts constantly running on this map. And so it makes that trailer that I first saw kind of realizes it. It's like that is the vibe in the game. And so wherever you go, there's constantly people going around you, and you'll see little yellow icons. It's like that's a real person. And so they're usually like maybe 20 or so, like across the map. And it's kind of fun to see like what people are doing. But there are so many people. If you look at the map, they're just these little like white little weeble like, dots like flying around going down courses. So when I hadn't moved into areas, I would look and see like a circle of them and be like ants, and I'm like, oh, that's a race. Okay, like maybe I'll go do that event. And when you're going down courses, you'll like, if I'm on a bike course, some guy on, a snowboard will do a trick like over, and I'm like, maybe that was canned, maybe that just happened, I don't know. And it doesn't really matter. It just kind of has this lively, like, right. In the same way, if you zoom in on the map, you can look at a 2D version or a 3D version of it. And if you zoom in close enough in the 3D version, you actually see people, flipping around. And it's so funny to see them just eat it, just be following somebody. And it's like, oh, cool, I wonder where that person's going to go. Just like right into a rock. And you can hear them because you're close enough. Just, the intro to the game, like someone eats it like intentionally. It's like the whole vibe is that it's just like, let's play this game so when we break our legs, we don't actually break our legs.
Right.
Like, and that's what I loved about SSX when I first played it, is I was like, you would die if you even attempted to do this. I love that there's some jumps. They send me off in a race, and I land perfectly, but I'm going so fast, and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? You sent me off the jump.
Have you ever seen the Hall of Meat in Skate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Very fun.
So it just it has that vibe, and the DJs really bring such a more honest, version of that. And then I'll just like unlock something, and like the cell phone will pop up in the menu, and the guy's like, okay, so blah blah blah. And it's like, I don't skip. Like, next. It's such a bummer that it can't be. Yeah, have a better vibe. But then again, they're sports devs, so it's like, what writers do they? I don't know. How important is that? Maybe they are creating characters that really speak to them, or maybe this is how sports people talk in France. I don't know. But
I don't think
Annecy?
so.
Where's Ubisoft? Annecy?
Ubisoft
Milan also apparently did a bunch of names like roll by comically in the beginning. I think they had a lot of support.
That's any Ubisoft
the whole
game.
team. But
People around the world.
It fills my soul, and it's really fun to get into a game like this. It's November, so it's like December, January, February. Hopefully it'll be a little colder here in LA. I'm going to Florida over the holidays, but like maybe I'll see snow sometime in the next couple months. So it's nice. Granted, there are desert areas too, but it's open world, so it's nighttime, daytime. You can just change that photo mode where you just go nuts. Very, very fun. And I still have a lot to do. Stunts that are like not courses. It's just you and some just crazy super Meat Boy thing you have to do. I tried one. It was like, okay, I understand how those work. Maybe if I want to beat myself up, I'll do those later. But a good example of like, oh, what's this thing? So very fun map to explore, and just open world if you're a fan of open world. Between this and Forza.
Do you like open world?
Yeah, meat's on, boys. Yum yum yum.
Meat's back on the menu.
Yeah, head for the hills.
We're gonna cook up some meat right now in the sizzle. This is a segment where we just take a little break from talking strictly about individual games, and I throw a question at you guys, and I quite like this one. I don't remember. Every frame trip, I have that moment of deja vu where I'm like, did we do this before? I don't think we have, but maybe we have. And that question is, are there any first-party properties, so like Sony God of War or Microsoft like Halo, so on and so forth, are there any first-party properties that you think would perform better with a different first-party company?
Oh.
So if you could poach one major brand essentially and put it somewhere else, would you do it?
Banjo-Kazooie.
Dude, I was just gonna say that.
That was the first. That was the one I thought of.
Dude,
that was the one I thought of.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of unfair, but
yeah, it is unfair, but it's so true.
That was eerie, dude. I did it. The thought was in my head for like 4 seconds before you said it.
Banjo is just languishing away.
Well, not only that, but I went to Microsoft first. How horrible that I was like, who can Microsoft give to Sony? It was like, or Nintendo. It's like they, even like
that's actually an interesting idea.
Situation.
A Banjo-Kazooie from Sony, yeah.
Or like or someone else.
Give
that would break my
yeah.
brain.
It's odd that they
living in a timeline where Sony is making a Banjo-Kazooie game.
But Nintendo's keeping Banjo alive right now. Like Nintendo's getting, all the Banjo love out there is coming through Smash Brothers.
Just let Nintendo make a fucking Banjo game.
Well, and the N64 Online is going to get it sometime down the road.
Right.
That'll be an interesting comparison video.
Mm-hmm.
And
to see Banjo-Kazooie on Nintendo Switch Online versus Rare Replay, because they had a whole team come in and make that emulator for Rare Replay.
To flip it around, you actually just said something that I think actually Microsoft could maybe do a very good job with. Like, imagine like a Playground Games Pilot Wings.
No, dude, that's what, again, the Riders Republic. I was like,
Yeah.
here we go. Man, it's been a while. These rings, I miss these rings. Really fun. And kind of also like, there was the thing about the 64 I'm looking forward to. Pilot Wings 64 is on that list, right? That's coming to the 64 stuff?
I don't know. I don't think I've seen it.
I don't.
There was some game,
remember seeing
some
Pilot
game on
Wings
the coming
64.
soon list that I got all excited about. I can't remember what that was.
I struggled to think of like every game that was announced, but I don't remember seeing.
It's something that I easily could see being there eventually, obviously.
But that's why I got so into the crew too, because it was just like anything to like, get the whole concept of travel and just give me so many different ways to do it. And that's what's so fun about Pilot Wings. You know, it's just like whether I'm like rescuing stuff with a copter or trying to break the sound barrier with a really fast thing, or like, fighting some weird chicken robot. Right? It was like big chicken mech or something. But Banjo's so funny.
I mean,
yeah,
it's
go the other direction. Yeah, like crap. Give wave race to Playground Games.
Absolutely. Don would lose his mind.
Yeah, Playground's gonna be busy. Maybe think something like Twisted Metal. I wonder what would be a fun team at Microsoft that could handle something like that.
I think we just keep saying the same dev. I mean, Horizon 5 did just come out, but I do think Playground Games would make a pretty sick Twisted Metal game. Possibly.
Yeah. Get to work, Playground
Games. But, you know, I think Wave Race is just one of those franchises that, you know, it was a technical marvel, you know, when it released. And so it's like, well, you want it to be on the best hardware you can get it on. And, well, PC's that. You know?
There are some properties that, you know, developers have understandably moved on from that would be interesting to see. It would be interesting to see like a Nintendo or Microsoft take on like a Jack and Daxter or Sly Cooper or something like that. I think would be cool.
Where's that Wave Race cross Dead or Alive Extreme Beach volleyball game that we know is going to work? You know what I mean? Where you can have the races going around the volleyball.
Work.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just saying.
That should happen.
You want to get some brands together when they need to. We need to collaborate to bring these franchises back.
It's weird. I mean, I guess I don't know enough about the Extreme Beach games to say definitively that it hasn't happened. But as far as I know, you can't do that. And it's such a... I don't know. It's such a good idea. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That'd be good. I don't know. Write in. Tell us what you think.
Yeah. I'd want to give Siphon Filter to anybody, but nobody's making stealth games nowadays. So.
Well, apparently Ubisoft is
stealth military.
Going to.
Apparently, stealth military games. They're gone. Stop making them.
I would
shut all the franchises down.
I would never be happier to be proven wrong. But I have no faith that Ubisoft will make the Splinter Cell game that people want.
Oh, right.
I have no faith. Please prove me wrong.
But there's that VR game coming too, which could, considering how much Splinter Cell excels at doing stuff in the dark, that could be really fun. That could be really neat. I wonder how like detailed that's going to look, or if that's going to be like cartoony at all.
It's on a slight twist of the question. It could be really fun to have Nintendo and Bethesda collaborate, like co-develop.
So then
Elder
Nintendo
Scrolls.
could have games that don't work.
Yep.
That would be really interesting.
Single player and online that doesn't work.
No, yeah, a Nintendo Bethesda thing would be interesting. I just don't. How would you visualize that? Like, what sort of game?
Well, I mean, I'd say, bringing more of that interactivity, into an Elder Scrolls game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like having, more mobility and more fun ways to interact with the environment and that sort of thing. I mean, which maybe they'll do, who knows? But it's like it feels like two very distinct different paths, right? Whereas like with Elder Scrolls, it's all about the character interactions and where people go and how your decisions affect, the AI in a sense. Whereas with Breath of the Wild, it's like more about this fun physics sandbox, and like put those two things together, and you could really have some fun times.
You made me think of that I desperately want. So Fallout Shelter is a game that is this great idea where you are managing a vault and building it out and dealing with all of the people that live inside the vault dwellers. But
I loved my time with it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of the catch-22 with Fallout Shelter is it's like, because it's this very limited mobile game, it just gets boring pretty fast.
Yeah, in like a day.
But I want that idea of like either managing a vault or just simply being like a day in and day out vault dweller in a more like sim aspect where it's like I can walk around and like actually like construct the vault in a 3D space and live out that life in a deeper, more meaningful way than you could in a Fallout Shelter. And like I would love that game so much. I think there's with universes that are so rich with something like an Elder Scrolls or a Fallout. There's like tons of spin-offs that you can do, and so it's sad when it's like distilled down to like its most basic concept. I don't know. But this sizzle is brought to you by some wonderful shout-out to your patrons. If you want to find out more, go to patreon.com/easyallies. It's a $250 tier. We shout you out on all of our various podcasts. This is a weird one. So once I'm done reading all these names, I usually have you assume a character. I want you to pretend, because this is the Forza Horizon episode, that you're giving a shout-out as a race car.
Nice.
You can take that and run with it as much as you want, but shout out as if you were a race car, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Shout out to Elthanas, Greg, TheDarkKnight Kettering, Caleb, Togi, Crawford, and Nick.
Shout out.
Was that like a horn?
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. I like it a lot. Bloodworth, how much do you like the N64 games on your Switch?
Very split. The funny thing is most of the controversy is around the games that I haven't played on my Switch yet.
What are those games? It's
mostly Ocarina of Time, and then there's been some talk about
you watch it.
Mario 64.
It's the greatest game ever made, man. That's fine.
Sorry, what was the other one?
I think Mario 64 people have had some issues with as well. So yeah, I've put the most time into like Star Fox and Mario Kart.
You were playing some win-back multiplayer this last week.
Played some win-back multiplayer during the extra live stream, which I've never played that game before. So
I haven't played it either.
Just figuring out like what is happening, how does this work, and then Sin and Punishment. I played through once I got the controller. I played through that whole game for the first time.
Cool.
That is a wacky, crazy game.
I think I played it way back in the Wii Virtual Console days.
Yeah, I played some of it with the Wii Virtual Console, but there's a lot of games like that to where like I dabbled. It was like, oh, I'm really excited. I'm gonna download this, and then, like I played like the first couple of levels, and then never finished it.
What is I know what this is, but I don't know what this is.
Sin and Punishment.
Like I've heard of it, but I don't know what game it is. An RPG or is it like a
5,000% anime? But the closest
do those numbers check out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
the closest comparison I would make is actually be to Star Fox. It's a rail shooter. So
yeah, that's a good comparison.
Cool.
You don't have like the branching paths and such as far as I know.
You're going forward like Star Fox, not right like R-Type or Gradius.
Right.
Okay.
You're going forward. You can dodge and roll to the right and left. You can actually jump over obstacles.
Okay, so this is
and then you shoot most of the things on the screen. There's two different there's like a free shot, and then there's like a lock-on, so that way you can focus on dodging while you're shooting. And then when enemies shoot certain things that you like, missiles, then you have a sword on the back side of handle, and you just whack them back at the enemy, which is pretty cool. And
I own this game already. Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of cutscenes and dialogue. It's interesting because even though it was only released in Japan originally, like all the dialogue is voiced in English.
Wow.
And
N64. Wow.
Yeah, and there's not a second where you're just reading something. It's all voiced.
Maybe that's why I've heard so much of this game is like that's like so crazy rare for that console that you would get something like this. Maybe that's why.
Star Fox had a lot of
just always
voice work. Yeah.
Before this game came out on Wii Virtual Console in North America, it was definitely one of those. There were certain games that I think really built up a reputation in terms of, like,
absolutely.
Oh man, there was this great game that we never got over here, and they kind of built up this sort of legendary status. And I would definitely say Sin and Punishment was one of those.
It was very much like that. Yeah, that coveted game. And N64 importing was just not that common, so not a lot of people, had access to it.
Have you played Star Successor?
I haven't. I think I might have a Japanese copy, but no longer an access to a Japanese Wii.
I don't know how hard it is to get a hold of. I would imagine it's pretty hard to get a hold of, but I have a copy of it, and I should let you borrow it.
But this is definitely a game where, like I said, I didn't play it all the way through until I got that wireless N64 controller, because I think it really, really fits the controller in a way that does not fit very well with anything else. And so even when the service first went live, trying to control it and play it with the Pro controller was super weird because the button mapping on the Pro controller for N64 games is super weird, and you can't remap it for whatever dumb
Why would
reason.
you want to do that, right? Non-controller remapping is one of those things that is just unforgivable. It's not a serious offense. No one should go to jail for it, but it's like, it never makes sense to me. I'm always like,
supposedly you can go into the system menu and remap all the buttons on the control, but I don't. That feels like a pain in the butt to me, right?
It sure is.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. This is the first time Nintendo has ever brought classic games to a contemporary console.
Yeah,
so I do have to.
I knew it.
I do have to cut them some slack.
I knew it was coming.
I actually think, Blood, that one, that's just completely ridiculous that isn't an easy, immediate option. And the other feeling that I had when I booted up, just the N64 menu on the Switch, I was like, like this just doesn't feel like very many games. Like, it just feels like with the rollout of this, there should just be, how do you not have Smash 64 in your launch rollout for this? Like, it's
that would be an
crazy
excellent time for that game.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, and this has been true of all of the online stuff, the thing that still blows my mind is that there's no sort of manual. There's no way for me to learn how this game works.
Which that's a generation where you need a
you need a manual. Because when I would see the button mapping screen, I wasn't looking for a button mapping screen. I was looking for I was playing Contra on the Genesis, or what button does what, and it's just like ABC. I'm like, that's not what I mean. What button does what? I just have to keep pushing the buttons until I figure it out.
Yeah.
But at least I had the rewind to sort of okay, I'm dead. What button now? What button does that? So that's very strange to me that they don't have that. So that's the overall criticism. But yeah, I think with some of these games, without a side-by-side comparison, it is hard to tell, is this better or worse? Because, well, for one, it's rendering things at 720 for the N64 lineup.
Yeah.
And so they already kind of, they look weird compared to natively running at 240 on an SD TV. And so upscaling that and especially when you get the 2D sprites with all their blocky pixel outlines, you can't help but think, well, that's not going to look like it was supposed to look. But then, you see some of the side-by-side comparisons of Zelda and the fog differences and the alpha not blending correctly and reflections not appearing correctly and things like that. And like I said, I haven't gone and done a side-by-side myself, but it feels like, okay, yes, if you don't have an N64 handy, and you haven't played it in a while, or you've never played it, then maybe you won't notice that these things are issues. But I think that regardless, there is a sense of atmosphere and vibe that is going to be lost there, no matter what. And so, if you're like me and you can pop out the N64, you can play that instead, and it's like, okay, well, no big deal, other than it doesn't look as good as I would like it to. But I think that the expectation is that, hey, Nintendo, you made this system, and you're charging this much money for this service.
Absolutely.
It should run perfectly. Even if it's very, very hard to do, you're charging this price, and I have to pay this price even if I just want to play one game.
Yep.
So why is it, and Ocarina of Time is that one game for so many people. And so they don't care if Yoshi's Story runs perfectly because they don't want to play Yoshi's Story.
I just booted up Mario 64 and was driving around Warrior Stadium, and that definitely hit a nostalgic vibe for me, which was appreciated. But the biggest feature with bringing these N64 games to this console, we mentioned Smash, but this is something you can do in Mario Kart 64 right now that I haven't done, is being able to play this classic game online.
Yeah.
And you've done that.
Yeah.
How has that been in terms of interface and connection and nuts and bolts?
It's an interesting interface because it almost feels like doing like a what is it? We've done it so much with like Ubisoft and stuff. We're we're looking like a virtual desktop parsec. It feels like looking at a parsec session.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because there's a host, and you're all looking at the N64 menu, and and the host goes and selects the game, and and then once you get to like a character select screen or something, it's like, oh, okay, now I can pick my character. So it's like beaming to you essentially a local multiplayer session. And I was wired. I think Ben Hansen was wired. I think maybe somebody else was wireless, but it seemed to run just fine for us. Like it felt just as good as playing in person, So it was pretty cool that way.
It's funny that you mentioned the Extra Life thing because I was on the Smash segment, and before I was on the segment, I was like, oh, I'm going to pop into training mode. And I was like, oh, man, Smash is so much fun. As soon as we hit online, I'm like, I can feel it. Like, I feel, like, the connection was actually pretty good, but you just feel this delay. Like, it's especially when you just go from offline to online, it's like things aren't quite as snappy. Like, you can get used to it, and it kind of fades away, but that transition from one to the other is definitely noticeable. Was that present at all? Like, was there any sort of delay?
It's not something that I noticed, to be honest, with those games. But I've been weirdly adaptable to that kind of thing. So it's I see the people that will do the timers and measure the the frame inputs and all that kind of thing. But a lot of the time for me, I don't notice it that much until like you're saying, until like it goes away and something that's very easy to demonstrate. And so I think the one time that in recent memory that I noticed a difference was I got the retro tank so that I could put older games onto an HD signal and capture and all of that kind of thing. And like like we were saying, like playing an N64 game. And I just popped in Mother 3, which I've left waiting to be completed, and that has a timing mechanic with when you attack. So you're like hitting the button on the beat of the songs to get more attacks in. And when I was streaming that before, I would get it pretty well, but it would still be tricky to get like a really long extended combo. And then after I got the retro thing, it was like, oh, I'm just getting 16-hit combos all the time now. Okay, cool. So it's one of those things to where maybe if I go from the online back to playing like a local multiplayer session, maybe I'll see the difference there.
Sure.
Or going back to an N64, I'll see the difference there. But I tend to adapt fairly well to it. And with Star Fox in particular, that was crazy because I don't think I've played that multiplayer with anyone since like 99. It's been a while. And then just remembering like, oh yeah, they put the items out on the map and you got to fly over there and get them. And then, you can look at the mini map to see where people are. And like, oh yeah, you kind of like do the zip around the world thing. When you get to the edge, you go back to the bottom. And so just relearning like just how that multiplayer mode even worked. It was pretty fun. Yeah.
I do think that is a really huge value proposition because it's like, okay, all the people that I used to play N64 with, like that would never happen again. But now, it probably still won't happen. But the potential is there.
I don't think it has any kind of random matchmaking. I think you have to play with friends. Yeah.
That's disappointing. Yeah. That's disappointing. I could definitely, if it did have random matchmaking, I actually didn't know that. Because my hope was to just jump into like Mario Kart 64 and do that, but bummer.
That especially might be fun to challenge people.
Yeah,
get on a leaderboard maybe.
So mixed results. I still want Nintendo to fix it. Get these things up to snuff. And put the best. I want them to have the best N64 emulator out there.
There's no reason.
I don't want that. Yeah. I don't want that Banjo-Kazooie to come out and be like, well, we've already got the better version of this.
So the next game that I'm going to talk about, I've purposefully not brought to Frame Trap because it was like, I want to get I want to get farther. I want to get farther. I want to get farther. And now I am very, 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 very close to catching up with the entirety of this story in Final Fantasy XIV. I just finished patch 5.3, and I've just got a small handful of patches to go through, and then I'll be entirely caught up. This is a goal I've had for literally years, and so I'm very excited that I'm almost caught up. But I want to kind of take you on this journey really quick because I am going to freak out, and I trust me. I get it. I will not spoil a damn thing. I will not get in any specific spoiler stuff. But I do want to talk about my experience with Final Fantasy XIV and why I'm so giddy to talk about it. So, Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn, played the beta, played it at launch, liked the game, but I wasn't like over the moon about it. I would say it wasn't like something where I wasn't ever obsessed with it. I enjoyed it. And then Heaven's Ward came out, and I reviewed that, and I had to get caught up in all of Realm Reborn, and then I played there was a lot of 14 at once. And Heaven's Ward was great. It was great. It really improved the story tremendously. It was a huge step up from Realm Reborn. Had a good time. Years-long gap between Heaven's Ward and my Final Fantasy XIV journey. And I would pick away at it here and there, and it would be one of those games where I'm like, I'm going to catch up, and it just didn't happen. And then I played Stormblood, and by the time I played Stormblood, Shadowbringers was already out. And people were losing their minds. And Final Fantasy, there's I love many, many, many games. I mean this from the bottom of my soul. Final Fantasy is one of the most important video game properties in the world to me. I wouldn't be doing this job were it not for Final Fantasy. And so when people got out there and they were like, Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers has the best Final Fantasy story, at least in the last decade, if not ever, I was like, you shut the hell up. You're competing with very strong memories, right? And well, and I'm embellishing certainly, but it certainly was created some skepticism. And I played Stormblood, and I was like, why don't people talk about Stormblood more? This is great. I love these characters. I love this story that we're going on, this rebellion, how personal things got. Like, I was sucked in, and I was like, this is really, really good. I don't think Stormblood gets enough credit for how many good things that it does. And at this point, Stormblood really turned me from being somebody that enjoyed Final Fantasy XIV to really obsessing over the lore and being like, I don't want to miss any dialogue. I want to make sure, I want to go back. I want to make sure that, okay, that's this person, and having questions about how everything connected. And I got a lot more invested, and I started Shadowbringers, and everybody was right. It was very, very good, but I was waiting for that moment to hit where it kind of met this staggering expectation that everybody had brought it up to. And I am not kidding. I was playing 5.3 very late last night, doing the final cutscene. I did the trial and then did the remaining quest of 5.3. And I did not actually cry. Tears didn't actually come down my face, but I was teary-eyed. I felt the tears welling up inside me. And I was like, I am so blown away at how emotionally invested into this that I am. And not to just give all the credit to 5.3, I think everything in Shadowbringers is all culminated into something amazing. But I haven't felt this emotional about Final Fantasy characters legitimately since Final Fantasy IX. I have not felt this in love with this world. And I think what's so cool about it is I feel like, yes, I'm emotionally invested. Yes, other games have made me emotional. Yes, other games have brought out the same passion in terms of storytelling with me, but I've never had a game get me this emotional, and I feel like I have such a well-rounded understanding of the world and the characters. Because it's an MMO, because you have to go through hundreds of hours of content, that is daunting, but the reward is where I feel like I know every step that this character has taken. I know how they got from here to here. I know who they're aligned with, why they made these decisions. When they speak about a location, I was at that location. I practically lived in that location for a short period of time. I got to know the people there. And so you just have this like connection that is so much deeper than a single player game can give you. And it's basically, this is a long-winded way of saying that everything everybody said was absolutely correct. And I see this community and I see how passionate they are. And I see just how like fervently devoted to this game that they are. And they are absolutely right. Like, I get it. Like, trust me, it felt that way. The reason why I put off getting caught up for ever is like, I was just like, I just don't have time for this. Or I am no matter how good it is, I am unwilling to, play Final Fantasy XIV at the cost of all of these other games. And it's many other games that you can fill in the time that you do all of Final Fantasy XIV. Now that I'm on the other side of that, I would pick up a Desert Eagle and shoot all those other games in the head. Like, it's that good. And I get it. I get it to people listening that going through A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Ward and Stormblood and Shadowbringers and all the patches in between, it's a lot. It's going to take up a ton of your life, and I'm here to tell you it is absolutely worth it. Like, I can't wait to play more. Like, I can't believe how good the game is. And, I'm talking a lot about the story, and I do think that is a gigantic part of it. I think it is right to focus on the story first. But I was doing the 5.3 trial last night, and it was just, like, so mechanically insane, where it wasn't just like, oh, yeah, we'll pop out some AoEs and you got to run out of the way. It was like, no, okay, listen, you're going to get this pause button above you, and if that happens, don't move. But sometimes you'll get a play button above you and run around and jump and don't stop moving. And then there's going to be multiple behemoths, and they're going to be going. You have to avoid all of them. And then there's going to be this beam of light that's going to etch out a pattern in the ground. And you got to not be in the path that it's etching. And it was so wild and like this game does not rest on its laurels, and it's amazing that every single step up from Realm Reborn to Heaven's Ward to Stormblood to Shadowbringers, that they just like, you were talking about the jump from Steep to Riders Republic. It's like, this is happening like with Final Fantasy XIV every expansion. Like, they just keep upping their game. They just keep getting better at doing everything. And it's wild. You put so much time in this game, and it's like, I don't feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. Like, it's constantly going out of its way to surprise me in some way. And so, yeah, I'm going to play 5.4 tonight. And it's like, I want to do that as soon as possible. Brandon, you talked about playing 14 and really enjoying it. I think you played a paladin?
I did two different characters.
Okay.
I did a paladin initially, and then I did a bard later on.
Nice. Okay. And so you just messed around with Realm Reborn, right?
Yeah, I never finished Realm Reborn.
Knowing you and like your affinity for Final Fantasy, like I would love to.
Oh, especially you saying like those places, like even now, when like they'll talk about something or I'll see something online and it's just like, oh, it's like Costa del Sol, and it's just like, oh, that, whoa. Like I can hear that music, like you experience and live in a world like that. Even just what 14 carried over from 11 was just like kind of like the Triforce, if you will, of like the three main starting cities. And so it's like, I know those are still there. I know there's so many places that are just like exactly the same as when I left, and so it's like, yeah, I'm still, even after all these years, like still emotionally connected to that. Yeah. And I can still, the kind of thing where it's like, if it got so much better than the stuff I was already enjoying so much that I didn't stop playing because it wasn't good. I just stopped playing because I, other things happened in my life, other projects and games.
Yeah, it's weird because I wouldn't say A Realm Reborn is strictly bad. It's just in comparison to what comes after.
Yeah. It's like TV shows. There's like a lot of TV shows I get that where I'm just like, I'm really enjoying the first season, and people are like, just wait. Okay, like Korra was like that. I'm like, season 1, I forgot it was really fun. They're like, dude, just wait till season 3. Just wait. Like, and again, like you were saying in the Shadowbringers, like, you were right.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Well, it's
so tempting. Because I like games as an interactive storytelling medium, and so it's like a bummer to miss this. You know, it's like a bummer when it hits a high. You know, it's how I imagine some people with like Half-Life Alyx, where they're just like, I just can't, I don't want to or can't do VR. And so like, I'll take your word for it, you know, that there's just, some gate between me and that. There's a rift at Easy Allies. Can you feel it, Blood? Between us and the Brad and Damiani?
Yeah.
And Huber's catching up, right?
Well, I don't think he currently is.
Okay.
He was back into it, but I think it's a big commitment.
It's the commitment.
It's the commitment, yeah.
There's not many bigger.
But, yeah, I mean, 14 definitely like grapples with the kind of enormous legacy of Final Fantasy, and there's so many references and collectibles and like literal characters from past Final Fantasy games that show up, and that is super appealing and fun, right? But like now it's like that stuff is just like a bonus. Like I in a lesser game, like Rathalos being in your game and I get to do this really cool fight against him, it'd be like that would be the highlight. And like here it's like, yes, all that stuff is there, all that stuff is awesome, but the original world, the original characters, the original story is so good that it even eclipses this stuff that you are going into with this like heavy nostalgia for. Like it just becomes this treat in a way, and that's so cool. And like, yeah, I think the other thing that gets talked about a lot amongst the Final Fantasy XIV community is because the game is so good, the community seems extremely healthy. And I'm not going to sit here and say I've never had a bad experience with a Final Fantasy group, but it is extremely rare. Like, I'll get into a dungeon where I'm going through the story and I'll be like, hey, I've never done this dungeon before. And people will help you out. They won't get on your case if you die. They'll get in there and they'll be like, okay, this mechanic is coming up. Make sure you do that. And so you're learning and people are just supportive and positive. And you're like,
yeah.
Wait, an online community, a gaming online community can be like this? Like, it is bizarrely positive and helpful. And I would say the only negative, doing so much of it at once is, in spite of how excellent, like truly excellent, I believe the story is, there are definitely moments where I'm like, that was amazing and I need to take a break. Because it's like, you'll have these moments where it's like, okay, you're going to go through several cutscenes. Make sure you set up some sufficient time. And it executes on it well. It earns this. I think it's good enough that it earns this, but there are definitely times where I'm like, all right, so like the last hour I've just been reading and watching people talk to each other, like I'm ready to fight. And again, it's not that I don't cherish the story moments. I think they're wonderful, but it is a lot to go through pretty consistently. And so that can definitely wear on you if you're doing it a lot at once, even though it's certainly worth it in the end.
Got some good music in that game there too.
Have you heard any of the Shadowbringers music?
Yeah, dude, I've heard it. It's incredible, man.
It's so good.
Whenever one of these expansions comes out and we get into GOTYs for music, it's always like, this is a powerhouse. There's a lot of different places. The diversity and the value that you get, experiencing that world and feeling the breadth of like all the different locations, like all of that's there in the score as well. You feel a world. You're like, I clearly just traveled.
And the songs are certainly enjoyable on their own, but I think hearing them in the context really does make them transformative. And like this game knows when to ring that bell, dude. Like you'll go through a dungeon and you'll get to the fight and then suddenly the vocals kick in and you're like, I'm just hitting numbers on the number pad, but I feel like I'm going to war. Like it's just they accentuate the mood so much and they make it so exciting. And even like in some of the story moments as well, they will have that music kick in at just the right moment and you're like, oh my God.
The primal remixes and all that.
Oh, it is incredible. Like,
I like people that message me. They're like, there's a Kefka fight in that game. It's like, I know.
Yeah.
I know. They're most of my favorite memories from the entire franchise are in there. Plus all of the stuff I want to do that I haven't experienced yet.
And like, 14 has this disgusting plethora of stuff to do, right? Like I did pretty much spend like just weeks in Gold Saucer alone, just like grinding it out, trying to earn cool stuff, playing the super fun and creative games. And like it's fun getting loot and doing transmogs and trying to make your character do all this stuff. All of that stuff is there and gets its hooks in you in its own way. But like those qualities are laying on this bedrock of like, I care about this story. Like not people are going to be upset about this, but like Destiny, for instance, over time I've come to appreciate the Destiny lore, but I really had to like put in the effort to appreciate it, right? Like after watching YouTube videos and doing my own research, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting. It didn't always necessarily come across in the game in the way that I wanted it to. But that stuff is there and it's cool. With Final Fantasy XIV, I'm like, I would die for some of these characters. Like, you've done such a good job of endearing them to me that, like, it makes me want to go out and grind and level up all the jobs and do all of the content. Not just because those activities are fun on their own, but because I'm just so in love with this world. Yeah. And I think that is such a captivating feeling, because I feel like I play so many games where it's like, it's about the numbers, right? Like it's about checking items off a list, and that stuff is fun. It's a great time, but it's nice if there's some emotion behind it.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Brandon, speaking of emotion, talk to me about Unpacking. This is definitely a game you have been championing.
The embargo for this was like 2 days after the last time I was on a Frame Trap. I don't know if I was on the last episode or the episode before that, but I was like, I can almost talk about Unpacking, but I can't. And I'm here.
Easing you
I've
live.
reviewed this game. I still have so much to say about this game. This game is like, I think I was like driving with Amanda, and I'm like, I've decided, Amanda, to call this game a gem. I'm very particularly using that word. Gem, or this kind of like a word like genius. Like there's words where I'm like, I don't know if I would use that to describe this. Or like
beautiful is one of those words.
To me, to me a gem is like something where, you know, you have like a big treasure chest and you're just like, these are all great. And then, whoa, what is this thing? And people might miss it. And especially if you're like, if you played Life is Strange, if you played like stuff that's like very narratively driven, like you gotta at least check Unpacking out, because it's a great game. I think you can play for a short amount of time and still the investment's fine. Like if you don't really want to get into a big like 8, 9, 10 hour campaign, like right off the bat, depending on how meticulous you are, it's fine. You can come back to it and it's there, and you can even go back and replay. Like the first level, you're just in this little girl's room, and like I played that like 4 times because there was the demo that first came out, and it's just fun to like no, you know, you can just do it. I mean, at the end of my review, I did a time lapse. That's just me, you know, like almost doing some of it from memory.
I've been seeing some fun time lapse retweets.
But you're basically on you know, removing objects from boxes. You have a little option of which boxes to open, depending on, you know, obviously you have to open if one's on top of the other, you got to go through them. And you pick out an item and you can just kind of like remove everything. Like you'll have like a couch or the floor or a bed. So if you want, you can just dump everything out and then figure out where it needs to go. And then that just gets more and more complex as you go through it. The kicker, and what I was like, oh, I can see them kind of playing at this. And then like 6-7 hours in, I was like, damn, like not only is this taking me to emotional moments I was not expecting, it's doing it in ways I've never seen video games do before. Kind of in a fun way, like you know, kind of like VR does sometimes, Ben, or like, you know, Brothers. Remember Brothers? Did you play Brothers?
I did.
Brothers?
Yeah.
You know, Brothers, like kind of, you were like, ooh, you know, it's so much so that I don't even want to come close to spoiling what it does.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a thing that has nothing to do with a story or anything. It has to do with gameplay.
Yeah.
And it's like a developer. This is Ferris and team, and they know like I got that controller in your hand and I can mess with you. And they're like, I know you're just, what's this item? What's this item? And so it's like, I'm going to throw 20 things that don't mean anything. And then that 21st object, you're like, oh, okay. Well, if I have this, then that means that person, I get it. You know, and that's so cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And I'm so much a voyeur. I'm terrible at airports because I've had so many travelers just look at me and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, but you're fascinating. Like you're just I want to know where you've been.
My hope is that you tell them that. I'm sorry, but you're fascinating.
I'm behind their shoulder breathing on them, and I understand, if that's uncomfortable. But libraries and parks, I just love people watching. It's just human beings are so fascinating. It's part of why I love games, part of why theater, and why I wanted to be an actor initially before I got into video production, because it's really fun to Amanda calls it the human experience. She loves that as an actor. She's like, I love to be other people because I come back to myself, and I learned so much. And I got to be this woman. I got to be like, oh yeah, like why do I have so many socks? It's like, oh, these are underwear, these are socks. Okay, it's like, as like a dude, they're not that, they're pretty easy to discern. And just like, yeah, I tweeted this. I'm like, where would I put my bras? It's like, yeah, I just have T-shirts, whereas like these are blouses and these are shirts and these are button-ups and these are, and so it was interesting not only figuring that out, but then refiguring it out again and again when I moved into a new spot. And I got really invested in her and the people she cared about, and I never learned any of their names, or they never told me what city I was in. It's like there's so much. Reminds me of Inside Out, which is my second favorite, I think, Pixar film. It's definitely in the top 3. In a way that I'm like, I have so little in common with this little girl, and yet it's so universal in its themes that I'm, even on the second, third viewing, I'm still just wiping tears away. And there were some moments. There was like one in particular that I like hinted at with Blood when we were writing the review, because I was trying to figure out like where I wanted to settle on a score, where I like got a lump in my throat, called Amanda in, because Amanda loves it too. She's like halfway through the campaign, and I just pointed at the screen, and she's like, what is the, oh. And she knew, like, I know what that means. Like, that's beautiful. And I was like, isn't that great? Like, it's very special. It's really, really cool. And it's funny to see, because I can talk about this later, but there's some stuff I didn't know what it was. And it's interesting culturally to see other people in social media, and people are like, the hell is this? And you're like, that's a GameCube. They're like, it's a purple box. I know what that is. And you're like, what? Whereas like, damn, mine was magnets. I got like, what are these numbers? I'm like, I guess they're like cookie molds. Like, I don't know, I put them in the shelf. And then like 5th time I had a fridge, I just like, oh my God. Everyone I pulled out, like, yep, A, B, C, there's a heart. Yep. Like I could have put these on the fridge the whole time, but I was like breaking my back trying to make room in the drawers.
This game's kind of been a whirlwind, because you expressed interest in it very early on, and you were like, I just like unpacking and organizing and doing all of that. And so like, yeah, I'm super into this game. And so for you to have that kind of be your entry point, and then to walk away being like, no, I was crying at this game. I definitely did not expect that.
And it was done, it was just done by a team that's just very passionate about this. And you can tell, like, they're very invested in this world. And it's about art as well, like, not to, like, hint at story stuff at all, but, like, you're playing a woman, and she is an artist. And so it's neat to see her inspirations and how, as an artist, things can evolve. Is something I definitely appreciated with, can evolve from play into work, like, hey, we're all here playing video games. And so it's neat to see, like, as a kid, she's like, these things are fun. And as an adult, it's like, not only did I turn them into my career, but I have these fun little mementos from my life, and it's like, it's neat. There's some great, like, Star Trek The Next Generation episodes where Picard lives, like, a whole life, and so it's like, after 8 or 9 hours, you're like, man, that was like 25 years or so, like, give or take. And they don't tell you specifically. So it's fun to fill in the blanks and kind of tell your own story with the stuff they give you. The music's really good.
And it sounded like you played a demo of this before?
They had a free demo. They still have a free demo on Steam. I think it's the first 3 years, maybe the first 2. But really just the first one is enough to know if you're like, I recommend mouse and keyboard. Like it's like you just move the mouse around with the analog stick, like if you play it with a controller. So I played on PC, and that was really nice to just, and for people just listening to this, they're like, I've never heard of this game or seen it. It has a pixel aesthetic that is just chef's kiss, man. It is so, because you're just staring at a room that it has so many natural, right angles and 45-degree angles. And so from like a really minute pixel standpoint, everything just clicks like right on the shelf. It's so
that's
so
the
satisfying.
thing I was telling him with the review, just like mechanically, like how they managed to make all this work. It's just like, okay.
Like towels you can stack, or you can hang them, or shirts you can hang on a hanger, or you can stack them up. Like jeans, I was like, I never have enough hangers, so I'll just stack all my jeans. Yeah. Which is not what I would do.
Just again, that fact, just to take an object that can either fold or hang. That's like,
and dude, some of the DVD, like some of the, GameCube games, you pull it out and you're like, okay, I know what that, my favorite DVD was The Matrix. I would pull it out and it's like the green where I could see, in the middle, and, just enough pixels, to pull off that image. And so it's fun to just, I'll throw all my DVDs up there, and then before I officially say like, all right, I'm done with 2007 or whatever, you just like look at the shelf and just like, okay, move that one next to that, and all right, I'm done.
When you told me this game was a kind of emotional and gut-wrenching, I was so not expecting that, and it did make me more interested in the game, but I wonder, like, do you think knowing that ahead of time hurts the experience at all? Like, do you think maybe you get more out of it if you just kind of didn't know anything going in?
No, because it's not a traditional narrative. And so if I told you, like, I really liked that character, dun, 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 you're like, okay. And so like you're playing a mystery game or something, and that character shows up, and you're like, well, I know this person. Like, there are no NPCs, there's no dialogue, there's nothing. So it's like you couldn't, just based on knowing there's a swing coming, like, I don't know where that could come from. That could come, like, I was expecting, I wouldn't say this does or doesn't happen, but it's like death to come into it, because it's like you're moving into a new space. And so like that could be, moving in with a parent that's ill, or moving, it's like, wow, there's so many different ways. Amanda and I were speculating, like, how long is this game and how many chapters do we weigh in? What would be an interesting ending to this game,
Right.
And so, yeah, a lot of that stuff is just interesting to explore. And stuff might not mean anything to you. She moves in, with the gal who's like a designer. She has like a little costume thing in the living room. So just like, I've lived with, musical theater people before. Like, I know this environment. And you go into the living room, and like the D&D dice are out there. The dice tower is out. There's 2 character sheets. Like, or you might bounce right off that and be like, "Whoa, this kitchen!" It's like it might. It was interesting being like, all right, tampons go here. There's just a lot of things culture-wise too. You lived sometimes with people who have like, a specific regional, culture, or a religious culture perhaps. And so you kind of, you have to honor those things, or, like pull out a cultural object, and it's like, in front of the TV. Yeah, it wants to be there. Okay. Like, it looks beautiful. I don't know what that is, but that's kind of getting to know people, especially in a living space. So,
that's super
cool. It does a lot with very little, and it's just, again, for anybody who's like, oh, I like organizing things, or oh, I like weird stories. Like, if either of those 2 things are true, super easy to recommend.
You mentioned like speculating about the ending and how long it could be. How long did it take you to get through it?
I think it's like 9 or 10.
Okay.
But again, it's like I replayed portions of it. I watched Amanda play a good 3 hours collectively. She would just kind of like come by when I was finishing up, and I'd be like, ooh, do you want to do this fun level?
Cool.
And it was neat. Yeah, it was like a vague story, and yet specific enough that we could be like driving, Milo to the park, and I'd be like, oh, I did this thing last night and this happened. And she's like, neat. Like, good for her. Like the character you're playing as. I was like, yeah, like this one year was tough for her, but then she bounced back, and it's going well. So it was, it was just neat feeling, getting a view into this person's world. It's like, I'm so close, and yet no one's here. So it's an interesting occupation of a life. That I hadn't done before in games.
Yeah, it's really interesting having these 2 games be back to back, because Final Fantasy XIV is a very traditional, like, okay, sit down, cutscene, dialogue boxes.
Right.
Whereas this is just a very
no
different
dialogue
direction.
Boxes was like, wow. There's not. It's object. It's like the just. I'm playing through Resident Evil 4 VR for a second time, and just love looking at stuff. And like Resident Evil is very much about that. It's like we want you to, items can be scary, and you want you to discover things in items and have it be a mystery. And so it's just like, what the hell? What is this? Oh, it's a bottle opener. Like that. It just that exists outside of the emotional story, which exists outside of all the cultural references. And so it's just like a lot of fun, whimsical things going on at the same time. And one of the only things that you actually helped me kind of curb. You were like, I understand that, but you should have an alternate, because you're giving this a fairly high score on like why it still works. But sometimes it's moving, man. So like sometimes I would finish a level and be like, all right.
Right.
When those boxes go away, you're like, woof. That bathroom is a little tricky, especially the kitchens are like, like where I was like, I just leave my pots on the shelf. What? And the game's like, put them away. I'm like, okay, So like at the end, if something isn't where it should be, they kind of flashes red. And so I'm like, sometimes like a Frisbee in one apartment, I'm going room to room, like, where do you want it? I don't know, like in my closet. Okay. So that's why it didn't get up into the 9s, but it's just like, super nitpicky thing that another player might adore or not have an issue with. So
cool.
Check it out if it sounds even remotely interesting. If you like pixels, just go buy it.
I wonder if there's ever been a listener/viewer of Frame Trap who, before watching and or listening to the episode, didn't own any of the games talked about, and then like went out and bought all of them.
You need to assist people in that, Ben. You need to have the Steam links in the description. You need to have. We need to have.
Enough in the description.
We need to have. You know
yeah.
the humble bundle. We need to have the frame trap bundle.
Yeah.
The frame trap bundle. Where you just go. There's a button you hit at the end of the episode. It just auto buys all the games.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, what would be in the frame trap
plus
bundle?
Some V-Bucks.
I don't play Fortnite, but Huber does. Huber's on.
Just give him to Huber.
Yeah,
give him the codes.
Every copy of the Frame Trap Humble Bundle you buy gives V-Bucks to Huber. That's how it works. Yeah. But right now I'm going to give you the HOTTAKE. Love the enthusiasm.
I used the shocks in the chair to brace for that one. That was nice.
This was inspired by Call of Duty Vanguard. It's definitely a topic I think that's been discussed, but Vanguard just really put a pin in it for me because looking around, and Call of Duty is so wide and massive. I'm sure this isn't exclusively true, but the general consensus seems to be like either dislike for Call of Duty Vanguard or aggressive indifference. Like, yeah, it's just super uninspired and bland. It's whatever. It's another Call of Duty. Like, it just everything about it seems to be a shrug of the shoulders. And it's like, man, this game comes out every year. Mm. Like, and it's such a massive success that, like, does any of this matter?
It's funny the words you used. You didn't say this franchise releases a game every year. You said this game comes out every year.
Yeah.
And like it's a good way to phrase it.
Sure, yeah. But it's just so...
Even if they like move to a totally different decade, you know, it's still like, okay.
But like
you expect.
There are so many games, right? Like even highly anticipated, like hypothetically, right? Let's just say Breath of the Wild 2 is like abysmal. Or like, like Cyberpunk comes out and it gets lambasted. And I feel like that has really had an effect on the perception of a CD Projekt Red product, right? Yeah. Whereas like Call of Duty, it's like, I just had this moment where I was like, does anything anyone is saying matter at all, right? Like, does it matter if it comes out and it gets like 7s and 8s or 5s and 6? Like, will the result be pretty much the same?
I don't think we're there with Pokemon. I think we might be there with Call of Duty. I think we might. Some franchises.
What do you mean there?
At the point where not making the right decisions with the franchise, being like a little cocky, like kind of with what they need to do, is starting to wear on the fan base and is starting to actually show up. There's so many factors, like cheating has a lot to do with it, the general attitude around Activision and Activision Blizzard. Right. So it's like hard to, say what one sentiment, is. I'm sure their exit surveys are all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I've wondered for a long time, from a business perspective, like what is it going to take specifically for this one franchise?
Right.
Because I've been through so many different review phases, different editors-in-chief at Game Trailers, different writers, different people streaming Call of Duty and reviewing it, going to review events, talking to other people there. And it's just has all, it's not an interesting conversation to have around Call of Duty because it's just going to show up and just, it and Madden are just going to push everything aside.
Right.
Everything just gets to hold that position for the first half of the year, and then they just get knocked out.
Yes. So that exact feeling, I reviewed Call of Duty Ghosts at Game Trailers, and this
lucky you.
No, this is at the beginning of my career, and the sentiment was exactly the same then as it is right now, where it's just like, yeah, it's just another Call of Duty. There's going to be another one less. There's nothing remarkable about this. It's not great. Just, again, aggressive indifference. And it's like, here we are all this time later, and it's just like, we're just having the same conversation again. Like, something has to give.
You know what I think is worth mentioning? And I say this with tremendous apology to the people who are fans of this franchise because I don't know what the hell is going on. I got to read up on this. There's live events. Andrea Renee had a kid, and this is the first time she got out of her house to put on a fancy outfit and go to something. But League of Legends is freaking out right now. League of Legends is doing some whole arcane thing, and there's a crossover with
the show.
Fortnite, and there's I don't know what it's just like League does, where it's like a multi-tiered media event. Right. It's wild, and so it's hard to see like where the promotion ends and the
that's the
game
one that's
begins
linked up with
like,
Rihanna too,
what's
right?
What's all the stuff in between, and even with Fortnite, it's kind of fun for it to be a blitzkrieg. It's fun to just be like, whoa, that's not even.
Fortnite has gotten to a point where you could tell me that literally any crossover is out. You could just be like,
it's like
this is in Fortnite.
It's like the Onion in politics.
Yeah.
You're just like they're out of a job.
Right.
They can't keep up.
Right.
And it's like what what are we waiting on for COD? It's like, for me as a fan, and I've been way into, I think Black Ops 1. Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 might have been like the most I've got really, and zombie
good.
modes.
Yeah.
The Jeff Goldblum, whatever game that was, man. I just, and there was one crazy, was Black Ops 2 the big future one? Would it have wall running in it?
No, Advanced Warfare.
Might have been Advanced
Warfare.
And then
there's Infinite
I think that was
Warfare.
like my arc where I was just like, man, I didn't miss him. Zombies is kind of has that freshness that I look for and is really exciting. But even that I just kind of is not enough for me to make time for it.
So that's another part of the conversation, I think, where like Call of Duty has been so big for so long, so consistently, where it's like, what other plays do they have? Like in the last few entries, they've gone back to World War twice. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like we've done Future several times. We've done a bunch of contemporary warfare. It's like where do you go? Like, can this series go in genuinely exciting new directions? And I think the other thing is, like we brought up Madden, right? It's like that is your only option when it comes to like professional football games that have the license. So, but with Call of Duty, it's like it's coming out this year before Battlefield, before Halo. Halo is getting a lot of buzz, especially.
I would love
to
see Halo kick Call of Duty's ass.
Like, is it actually possible?
So
the
much.
Multiplayer's free to play.
I know.
It's going to be on Game Pass. It's just like, is this actually a moment where the tide turns?
Only because, like, think about it. If it's like, what's the music competition? Eurovision, it's like what if the same person won 3 Eurovisions in a row? You would just want the underdog like to win. And it's funny to think of Halo as the underdog. Like that's the thing. It's like I just want
it is though in a weird way. Yeah,
it's the reason that like when capitalism works. Capitalism doesn't work all the time, but it's fun when you have more than one console, when you have more than one people who own a football license, like when you have competition.
Yeah,
and so it's like I want Call of Duty. We were talking I think before the stream where I was like, I wonder if they're going to pull an Assassin's Creed. Ubisoft, for all of its many faults, is strangely very, reactive when it comes to that kind of stuff. Where like if they have a franchise that doesn't do well, they're like, whoa, like hold on, we got to fix this. And I remember when they took out the brand, the time off for Assassin's Creed, I was like, wow, like Activision would never do that, and it's a bummer because these teams, I've been to 2 Call of Duty review events, both in San Francisco, I think, and like. These teams are brilliant. Like these are really, really good devs, that pour their soul into this. When Call of Duty, I went to that preview event when it was just Call of Duty, when it came back, or Modern Warfare, when they brought Modern Warfare back. Whoa, like nobody that went up wasn't like, hi everybody. It was clearly like, whoa, they are so excited. Like, and I was like the second preview whole crew that they had met.
Yeah.
And so it's just like such a bummer that the stuff they get to do is not exciting.
I think that's what makes it so
or
heartbreaking,
really changing, or really making other developers quake in their boots, not just because of numbers, not just because the install base is so powerful.
So Black Ops Cold War, played through the entire campaign recently, and that was made by Raven. Phenomenal developer. But the reason why I bring up Black Ops Cold War is what they did with the campaign was a genuinely interesting direction where it's like, okay, you have these optional missions, and you have these puzzles to solve, and you have this one mission where you can kind of decide how you want to tackle the approach. And it's like, all these ideas are really cool, and there's something here, but like, it was just a seed of it. And it's like, you just don't have probably the time to like really flesh this out and really make this wild and different and crazy because it has to come out this year, and you can play through that campaign, you can feel it, and you can feel the like cutting down of ideas in real time as you're going through it. Right. And it's heartbreaking, and you're like, what if you could just take as much time as you needed to turn this into something actually special and memorable? Yeah.
And well, that's kind of what's funny about it, because they could have all the time. Like nobody's gonna stop playing Call of Duty.
Sure.
Right.
If they don't come out in a year, people will keep playing. And that's kind of one of the things that, like you're kind of saying, like the aggressive indifference. It's because, like I think in the past couple of weeks, I've gotten a Call of Duty email like almost every day.
The top 20 MPDs have at least happening. 2 Call of Duties in them every month, if not 3.
And so it's the release date of a new game just feels like another just like check mark of Call of Duty happenings. They're always adding new content. They add new content to the previous game pretty much up to the release of the new one. And I have had friends text me like, "Hey, you playing Call of Duty?" Yeah. I'm like, "No, sorry, I'm focused on Forza right now."
Yeah.
But it's at the same time, I haven't even heard enough people talking about like, is the story good? Is the campaign good? I've got no idea.
Well,
I haven't heard people talking about the game itself in our circles, in like the industry circles. It feels like the people talking about Call of Duty are just the people that are always going to pick it up every year, and they're into Call of Duty. There's a new one. I'm grabbing it.
I was watching a Vanguard review, and they were talking about the campaign specifically, and they were like, okay, so there's all these different characters that you kind of get to know, and it's kind of this ensemble cast, and one of the characters is fantastic, and they're really emotional and really cool. Everybody else is just kind of whatever. I wish it was just as good as this one character. And it's so funny that you mentioned the campaign, because it's like, that's kind of exactly how I feel about Black Ops Cold War. I'm like, there's something here, but it's just not reaching that potential. And it sounds, I have not played the campaign yet, so this is secondhand information, but it kind of just, again, is echoing that missed potential. And it's so weird, because I do think there's this like base level of quality that Call of Duty does hit. I always have fun with Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Despite the aggressive indifference, I'm still interested in playing Vanguard.
It's like pepperoni pizza, man.
Yeah, it's exactly that's exactly what it is. It's like pepperoni pizza. But like, I think of playing Modern Warfare for the first time, and it's like that game changed an entire industry with what it did. It's like the how it blended. It's like now it's like you hear it and it's like, okay, whatever, man. But I mean, at the time, the way that it blended RPG mechanics and multiplayer and how it handled progression and all that stuff, it was like truly at the forefront of video games. And it's just, I sometimes like I see these glimmers, and it's like, I bet in a different world, in a different structure, maybe under a less oppressive yoke than Activision, like it could do that. And it's like, I would trade 5 years away from Call of Duty to have like that one super special game, but it's like, would the market, you know what I mean? Where it's like, this structure has been going on for so long. And that's why I return to that question, is like, does this matter? It's like, if they're making their money,
right?
Does all of this like breathless opinion, does it matter at all? Like, is this just like such a machine that...
Well, they had a letter from Activision Blizzard. I think it was like 2 employees or something. I think it was around the time. It might have been the delay of Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. And at the bottom of the letterhead, Hogan and I joked about this online, where they had like the brands.
Yeah.
And so it was like Overwatch, Warcraft, Diablo, Candy Crush, and
Candy Crush was
Call of Duty. And it was just funny seeing those. And it was like, yo, your company's in trouble, man. It's like I look at each of those logos and it's like, oof, there's something to be a little nervous about. And they don't have like a lot of, so a company like Ubisoft's like a little more diversified. Like even EA has these big weird pillars, but they're like they've been a little smarter lately.
Activision just kind of dumped so many things, and like they've had plenty of great franchises and great ideas over the years. And they used to have Spider-Man, and they used to have the Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and they used to have
Skylander.
Where now it's
King's
a thing.
Quest and Sierra, and
it's now a thing where we're praising them for bringing them back. It's like, thank you for...
That's Blizzard is for me now.
Yeah.
Blizzard's just like, let's just please...
Yeah, Crash and Spyro was
is it some anniversary?
Yeah.
Is there an anniversary coming up? Can we please just go back?
Yeah.
But the really depressing thing, if you really want to take this HOTTAKE and take it to the absolute deep end.
Yes.
One of the reasons potentially why a Vanguard is not really gonna bring any tears to the executives at Activision is Call of Duty Mobile is way more important. Like in terms of like messing it up. Like I don't think they can mess up a Call of Duty bad enough to have to take a year off or to not, because it wasn't us. It was just that one dev. They made a weird COD. But next year we got this whole other team with a whole other idea.
Right.
Coming out.
Yeah, the rotating.
Whereas
devs.
mobile, we can't. Can't. That's where
I think
it's gonna put turkey on my table this Thanksgiving.
I think it just depresses me so much, because I spend so much of my life being like, okay,
we're
like trying to understand where video games are now, and it's like, how could they be better? and I think to myself, like, okay, if Call of Duty just stays the course, right, where it's just it is such a familiar commodity to people, it has this incredible name recognition, it's doing so well, but like in terms of quality, if it like stagnates or declines, like eventually it has to reach a point where that doesn't work anymore. But I felt like, but then I go, I felt that way for like a decade. So it's like if I felt that way, you know, and I don't know the exact timing, I'm just saying for the sake of argument, if I felt that way all these years ago and it's still this behemoth, like maybe that just isn't true. You know, and it's like it's so amazing. I think there are so few things in the world where it's like the level of quality maybe doesn't have such a huge effect on its success. Like, I don't know.
I want Halo to whoop Call of Duty.
I want that too. I want it so bad.
Because Final Fantasy XIV has already whooped World of Warcraft.
And it has.
And then at New Year's this year, I want Microsoft and Square Enix to just clink champagne glasses. Like, well done, you know. Or Battlefield. Again, you know, I know Huber goes up and down on the new one, but that would be a great win as well. I would love to see. I'd love to see Activision be like, we can't just.
Well, it just feels like there's a floor that it will never get worse than. Right?
Yes,
they
that's
have
what I mean.
so much invested in it. They're never going to get worse than this point, and so because they're never going to get worse than this point, then they're never going to have people just, you know, get completely tired of it and walk away, because that point is still fun and addictive, and you know, your friend's going to talk you into buy it. You're going to play it over the weekend. You might not play it after that ever again.
Yeah.
But they got it. They got your $60.
And I was going to say, like, it's just the most disposable entertainment. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, I do think there is some value in that. You know, we human beings are complicated enough creatures that, like, I want some just completely forgettable entertainment in my life. Like, Call of Duty does fit this comfortable place that I enjoy, but it's just like...
when I booted up Forza Horizon 5 and I went past through, like, all the credits and stuff like that and created my character, got the first car, and then I, like, came out of the cutscene. I was like, please tell me where to go. And then just the arrows. And I was like, thank you! Just, you know, like, I don't... sometimes I don't want to...
Yeah, exactly.
You know, just tell me where to go.
Yeah, I think it's just... It's hard where I like Call of Duty enough that I want it to be better, and the overwhelming frustration of, like, maybe that doesn't matter so much. It's very weird. Like, there's nothing else that I think follows the same rules because they just don't have the scale that Call of Duty does. And, like, you're totally right. Like, people that are so outside of our bubble that would never listen to Easy Allies, they're probably playing and enjoying Vanguard right now. Like, they're so removed from this they just don't care. It's wild. Are we ready for some emails?
Mm-hmm.
Our first email, good batch of emails this episode, so thank you to everybody who wrote in. If you want to write in, askeasyallies@gmail.com. Ernie, it's funny Huber's not on this episode because Ernie's got a take.
Oh.
And I like it. Come at me with the take. Remember Resident Evil Village? Even though I finished the game twice, it wasn't very memorable.
Brutal.
Halloween made me think of horror games such as Resident Evil 2, Silent Hill 2, Evil Within, etc. And I began thinking, when is Resident Evil 8 coming out? Wait, oh shit, I have it. Are there any games that you feel just came and went, like you forgot said game was a thing? The only games that stand out that I can think of are both horror games, Resident Evil 8 and Evil Within 2. Just really punching Huber there. And both games have the same problem. The bosses talk too much. It makes the game not scary. Maybe it's just me.
It's funny. Forgettable is just like, oof, that's one of the worst. It's so harsh to say about a game you know somebody cares about.
Yeah.
I forgot it. Oh.
It's weird because, like, I do like this game and I had a great time with it, but
I mean,
it feels like everyone's forgotten about Deathloop already.
Oh,
like that was a bummer. Yeah, that happened.
It really felt like it happened overnight. Yeah.
We forgot Fortnite launched. Remember, we gave it an award twice.
Oh, right.
We just forgot. I mean, it's its own damn fault. We forgot. We didn't know what was this game's launch. You know, like how'd that even happen? Trying trying to think of stuff I knew about. But
I mean, the problem is if I forgot it, then I probably forgot it. I have to look.
I do
have to look at the list.
I do think this email brings up an interesting point because, I think part of the thing that is going on is there just seem to be more game releases every year, and games are having big updates which feel like releases, which makes everything more complicated. But also, there's so much going on in the world right now that time just feels distorted and fucked up.
I know what, and numbers back this up. What game got forgotten? That Aliens game.
Yeah.
Fireteam Elite.
Well, yeah,
just sank to nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty confident if you go back and watch the things I've said about that game. Yeah. I was fully expecting to maybe about 5 hours total. I think we were talking about reviewing it. I was just like, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to just spend a lot of time doing it. But it's like, man, the time I played it, I had a great time, but it just met my expectations. So I was like, okay, I can tell.
But it's weird though, because that's exactly what we were saying about Call of Duty. It's like, most people are not expecting the world of it. Meets my expectations. Gonna keep playing it every weekend.
They love Call of Duty as much as I love Aliens, so we're just like
Aliens, not that.
Yeah.
Well, Aliens. This is so weird to say because Aliens does absolutely have a broad, massive appeal, but in comparison to Call of Duty, it doesn't.
To me, this happens a lot too because we and I dig it. I'm glad that, especially for indie developers, that they can release something in early access, or they can release an unfinished version of something, or for all of the people that I know are very frustrated with the whole project. But I've just talked to a lot of people that really love Star Citizen, so it's just interesting to have these unconventional development things. So it's confusing to be like, did that launch? Right. Did that come out?
Yeah.
It's like
for sure.
What's PUBG doing right now? There's some games I'm I remember is Demolition Derby, right? Demolition Derby? Is that still
even
Demolition All-Stars.
Destruction All-Stars.
Destruction All-Stars.
Even games that I really love, I've had moments where I'm like, did Monster Hunter Rise come out this year? Yeah. Okay, it did come out this year. And that is compounded by the fact that it's we're talking about the PC version now. So did it come out a while ago? No, it just came out.
Every developer, especially for something like a Back 4 Blood, you got to have that chart that has your launch and then the spike and then the drop and then the plateau. And you're looking at that plateau. You're like, where is that number going to hit? And what's crazy is that plateau Square Enix seems to be totally cozy with Avengers. That blows my mind that Avengers is that they're
Are they cozy with it? Because I feel like Square Enix has been just
they're
recently
apologizing about it now.
Right.
Yeah.
They're just saying that they weren't pleased with it, but there's happy with it, meaning, they're internally just throwing parties, which they're not doing, but there's happy with it in terms of I don't get that I get that more communicated from people that are frustrated with it, or people in the editorial space who like to make fun of it. Whereas it's still chugging along, and there's still crazy updates and weird costumes, and just they're still investing in it.
The other one I saw scrolling through, Outriders.
Oh, dude. I mean,
And it's it had this weird wave, right? Because it seemed like it was going to be nothing.
It sparked for a bit.
Nobody was going to care. Huge amount of support. Very surprising. Came out of nowhere. Just blew everybody away. Now?
Dead and buried.
Yeah.
Who's talking about Outriders?
So crazy.
Yeah. That's why those Twitch bets are so much fun on the podcast. Just who's going to...
It definitely feels like...
It's like how long after launch? 3 days.
2 of those...
3 days.
2 of those were multiplayer. And so I feel like that's definitely... That's definitely the multiplayer curse. It's people will be really into you for a minute. And then they're just going to
stop.
Fall Guys is still doing some stuff.
But what's their plan? What does it really look like at meetings at Fall Guys right now of them really expecting... They have some really fun crossovers, but it's how much money do they have?
Fall Guys has the benefit of being a small enough game that they're probably well, we never expected this.
Sure.
So it's it's already exceeded their expectations. So.
Yeah, by and large, yeah.
Our next email comes in from Michael, and it is a very good email, but it's very long, so I might have to trim some of this down. Brian, we're talking about superheroes. It's a subject that you are passionate about. My pen stopped working. Very cool. Hello, Ben and Allies. Last week, October 28th, Marvel put out a press release that Skydance Media and Marvel are developing a narrative-driven blockbuster action-adventure game featuring a completely original story and take on the Marvel Universe, which will be directed by Uncharted creator and director Amy Hennig. As somebody who is a massive Uncharted fan, I'm excited to see Amy Hennig bringing her magic to other AAA video games, but as somebody who has borderline no interest in Marvel movie and games, I feel pretty bummed out that such a talented video game director is making yet another Marvel IP. Personally, I find it rather disappointing and worrisome that the same generational multimedia franchises such as Batman, Spider-Man, Star Wars, and Avengers are vigorously putting their stake in the ground within this AAA video game market. To me, it just feels like these corporations are adding another frontier on their massive portfolios rather than pushing the art form forward. I understand the panel is probably quite fond of the Marvel/Disney portfolio, so I'd really like to hear your take on this issue, and I hope my perspective helps you understand where someone like me is coming from. So basically, they're already extremely talented developers making games on the super popular IP. Could that be put to better use?
I have a take.
Yes.
Think about actors. Robert Downey Jr., good actor, right?
Great actor.
It's really frustrating seeing him just waste his career away with that role. You know what I mean? I wish they got like a bad actor to play Tony Stark.
I'm not sure I understand the take.
Amy Hennig. Yeah. Good video game developer.
Yeah.
Wants to work with properties that she's going to kick some ass in. Wants to come in and be like, hey, let's make a Punisher game that doesn't suck. Hey, let's make a S.H.I.E.L.D. game that kicks ass. Let's make a really cool, Nick Fury game. Where there's a ton of espionage, really huge AAA set piece action sequences like you have never seen before. I think there's all sorts of reasons. I remember Star Trek fans being pissed when Abrams made the jump. I remember one image that stays with me forever, and it was seeing a little baby Kirk with the Enterprise, and he was like, oh. And Abrams was walking away with Han Solo and the Falcon. He's like, all right, let's go. And they were like, but you just rebooted this thing. And they also love these properties that you love and you grew up with, and they want to do stuff with them that, I just don't think Amy Hennig could very easily been like, no, click. And a lot of people have before, there are a lot of performers and writers and actors and stuff like that that are like, I don't think Denis Villeneuve made Dune because he's like, oh, finally. A book, or so it's I am extremely passionate about this property, and so they connected her with something. I'm really curious to see. Patty Jenkins did the Wonder Woman films, and she's doing Rogue Squadron. Yeah, and she did a video that's my dad was a fighter pilot, and growing up, I was like, one of these days I'm going to get to make that movie where I'm really just going to get to tap into all these rush of emotions that I felt when I was a kid, experiencing all these people that did that for a living. And she put the the X-Wing helmet on and got into an X-Wing. It was like, oh yeah. So it's it could be a paycheck. I don't know. But I always try to think of that of somebody like Chris Hemsworth is just having a field day in that Thor role. And it's that looks like where they wants to be. So kudos.
So I've been watching, a ton, a disgusting amount of Shark Tank on Hulu with my wife. And this moment happens all the time where an entrepreneur will come in and they'll give this really emotionally charged story and they'll tear up, they'll start crying. And then the investor, normally Mr. Wonderful, will be like, okay, how many sales do you have? They just don't care, and they'll say point blank, yeah, whatever. I just need to know how I'm going to make money off of this. And it's so funny because that's kind of that's just nakedly how it works. And I understand, from a I'm on the side of criticism, right? We just had this conversation about Call of Duty where it's ideally I would love for everything in this perfect utopian world to be funded purely on merit and the value of the idea and just how creative can you be? I want to give you all the reasons to do it. Unfortunately, that market does not exist, and so I think it's pretty amazing that video games are as incredible as they are, but they still have to be filtered through this economic system. And it's if you're the publisher, right? And it's okay, this is a really great idea featuring a brand new world and brand new characters. Okay, I could give this giant check to that, or I could give it to this Marvel game. They're going to give it to the Marvel game 10 out of 10 times. It's just going to happen because it's a proven thing, and risk is such a factor, and you hear it all the time, right? You hear it all the time in the space where it's like the budgets of video games are getting so high that like they're just getting riskier and riskier, and so there's only so much potential in the AAA space to go after these risks, right? Like, I was freaking out about the quality of Shadowbringers and how good it was, and how like clearly the developers care and how awesome it is to see. If all of that work went into a brand new MMO, do I think it would be, that didn't have the Final Fantasy name attached to it, do I think it would be a fraction as popular? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, it wouldn't exist. It would not come out. It would not. Yeah, it would have died probably a long time ago. It needed that name in a way, and so just it sucks, but it's the truth.
And you have Hennig, who just got burnt so bad by a property that
by
Disney
another
owns,
major property
that Disney owns.
Yeah,
and here she is, going right back to the plate, and it's like, whoa, that must be just knowing Hennig and having met her once. It's funny. I met her at a Star Wars function, and dude, she will say something to me. I feel comfortable saying this because she's like moved on to a completely other project now. But she was with Todd Stashwick, who was working also in the Star Wars game that never happened. And I remember there was a Battlefront 2 billboard across the street. And we were just about to go into a Star Wars thing. And so I went up and I was like, hey, I just want to say I'm a big fan of Game Trailers, Easy Allies, and really excited for that, that game. I can't wait to decide more. And she went, well, and she looked up at the billboard and said, it's their year, and then walked in. And I was like, yeah, but I'm excited to see your thing. And I wonder at the moment, like what she was dealing with in terms of like, I don't know if I'm going to see the end of this project because it's kind of frustrating. And so her potentially getting to like put a unique spin on that. And I just think about the Arkham franchise, how much that changed everything. I think about like how much anyone making a superhero open world game has got to be looking at Spider-Man and how much power they have going into the sequel. And it's like very good things I think are happening across the board because comics and video games are partying right now.
Yeah. I definitely share people's kind of wish for new IP across the board, right? Just especially, in the film blockbusters and stuff. It's like, we're returning to Gremlins. We're returning to Ghostbusters. We're returning to Ninja Turtles. We're, just Transformers, just all this stuff. Just pull it, like, where's the new stuff that's as cool as that, right? Yeah. But at the same time, like, when you talk about, these Marvel characters in video games, it's like, it sort of feels like there's a wave of a lot of them, but they're kind of not, Like, when you look back at all of the Marvel and DC games that have been made over the years, and just the sheer dump truck of terrible games that have been made with these licenses.
The Super Nintendo was whoa. Even just Marvel on the Super Nintendo.
Even during the MCU, man, the Iron Man games were so abysmal. The Thor game was like, there was some okay.
There was a Thor game?
Oh yeah, there were Thor games.
Yeah, got to get that Cap game. Got to dust off my 360 and play that Cap game. I keep hearing good things.
So it's like, you still have very, very few of these franchises that have actually been done in video games in a quality way.
Yeah.
If you pick the right character with the right abilities, like, you could come up with a concept that's very different than a lot of what we're seeing right now. So,
and a lot of people know about a lot of characters they never know about before, and so it's neat to dig into Guardians or dig into another group, and you're like, oh wait, I'm actually coming from a place.
Right.
I'm kind of caught up here, and so it's like, did you know about this villain? Like, I didn't. Neat. And then if like Volume 3 Guardians like does some of the villains that are in the game, and you're like, oh hey, I got purchase here. Like, it could work out.
What the crap is Midnight Suns? I understand it from a gameplay standpoint, but like the lore behind all of this is just like, whoa.
Apologies who wrote this email, because if the Hennig game is a nightmare, you were right. But I'm always going to be optimistic about this because I just grew up as a kid constantly thinking about what the best Superman game was, what the best Batman game would be, what that looked like, what the possibilities were. Always keeping out hope.
Our last email comes in from Father Cashew, which is just a fun name. So shout out. Again, this is another long one, so I'm going to have to trim it down a little bit. But this is about getting lost in games. I just finished Metroid Dread, and the game brought into focus maybe the single most compelling thing in game design for me personally, getting lost. The point of this comment is not to critique Dread. I loved it, but one of my few criticisms of the game is that it doesn't make me feel lost like other Metroid games do. I'm realizing it's one of my favorite aspects of games and one that is completely unique to games as a medium. It's why Metroidvanias are my favorite genre and why Metroid itself is my favorite franchise. Myst, Dark Souls, Outer Wilds, basically all my favorite games have this through line of feeling completely lost and alone in the world. Maybe it has something to do with me getting lost in the woods behind my house as a kid and trying to find my way back home. I don't know. So my question to you all is, with more and more games doing everything they can to direct the player and ensure they don't get lost, what games, past or present, take the higher road, in my opinion, actually build getting lost into their design? What games facilitate this feeling of loneliness and mystery? Secondly, what game mechanics lend to this feeling of being lost? Surely it's not just a lack of waypoints or a map.
Valheim. Death having consequences, dying and then winding up, but where the hell am I? Bloodborne, dying and then wake up in a prison. Like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Max Payne, having a nightmare, and all of a sudden you're like, what? What am I looking at right now? Where do I go? Like, I miss that stuff. Alan Wake.
I think Outer Worlds is such a perfect example for what this person is talking about. Sorry, Outer Wilds. Yes, I meant Outer Wilds.
Hard to get lost in Outer Worlds.
Yeah, I meant Outer Wilds. Yeah. Because like the interesting thing about this question is not just it's invoking the feeling of being lost, but the second part of it is motivating you enough as a player to want to find the way forward, right? And so I think the way that you design a game has to put that in front of you in a compelling way. And Outer Wilds gives you this mystery. It gives you these clues. It gives you these things in the distance that you want to go out and chase after. And I think that is so important. And like, it's funny that you bring up Metroid Dread because it definitely is guiding you. But I felt that as I was going through it, it was like, yes, it's guiding me, but it's not beating me over the head with it. Like, I still feel like I'm figuring things out. I'm exploring. I'm finding. And so it's all a matter of presentation and how you put things in front of the player. Where it's like, if I really sit down and think about it, it's like, oh, like, you taught me that, but I feel like I figured it out. It's almost like this active deception.
Which is most of games.
Yeah, yeah.
Like narratively, like I appreciate that.
But
I know you like to get lost. I've cut so many Bloodworth reviews where I've seen you relishing in getting lost. What was that game where your brother gets kidnapped and you got to go into the woods to get him? You live in like
Roki?
a shack, Roki, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
you just
cool
see blood
game,
going to the end of a hallway and being like, okay, and turning around like, yeah, you love that stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with any other examples other than the ones that were being stated, and then I feel like most Metroidvania games kind of epitomize that, right? The Axiom Verge 2, is very much along those lines of kind of go where you want to, and there was a point where I was like, okay, I'm actually stuck now. Where the crap am I supposed to be?
Sorry, go ahead.
But I think it's interesting with Metroid how there are like all these different gradations of how people have felt about that. Where some people are like, I just went through the game and A to B, just tell me where to go. And it's like,
right.
Other people are like, I was completely stuck the whole time. I didn't know where I was supposed to do. I was so confused. And it's just like, wow, these both exist, And to me, I felt like I just got it, right? Like the combination of the map and the little details in the world. And it's like, I would go back and go backtracking and, now I'm somewhere totally unexpected. I feel like I stumbled into something, but no, this is actually where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the absolute best examples for this question of getting lost is Minecraft. Where it's like, you just spawn in a newly random generated world. You have no directive. You just can do whatever you want. And it's like the simple act of digging can lead to so many various outcomes, and like you truly do get lost where like you might build something and then walk away from it and then be like, wait, where was that thing again? So that's a very powerful feeling as well. It's funny because like getting lost can mean so many different things, like losing track of time, losing sense of direction, getting lost in the lore. Like it's such a
going into an open world. Like the moment where I just drove in Forza, where I was like, I'm not even following arrows. I don't care.
Yeah.
Or started to recognize like because those arrows are easy to follow, and then I was like, oh wait, now I'm driving over cacti. Forget this. It's just like I'm just gonna literally follow the mark over there and just go over hills. I don't care.
Yeah.
And like prohibiting getting lost, which is why I brought up Valheim, where like I go into mines in Minecraft and just leave candles, on the walls, like to mark your position.
Yeah.
And losing that, being like, oh no, no idea how to get out of here. I keep going in circles.
Well, and then they were talking about Souls and Bloodborne, and just that sense of being completely lost, and then suddenly realizing where you are, like. Oh, okay. Just
opening that gate. Like, I'm back.
It's such a cliche answer, but I think that's why, like, getting lost in a game, Dark Souls 1 will always be the thing that my mind immediately goes to because, again, of how it's presented. Like, it's like, wait, like, I went in that painting and I'm stuck here. Like, I'm completely disconnected from the rest of the world that I explored, and there's all these weird creatures. Like, how do I get there? You mean, like, I can just, like, lay in this nest and this giant bird will pick me up and take me to another place? It's just, like, such an incredible, like, Alice in Wonderland vibe that like I feel like it accomplishes the phrase like getting lost in so many different contexts.
Even the Chalice dungeons, have this kind of sense of like these layers of madness.
Definitely.
You do get caught up in the the intentional or just old. I remember Orcs and Elves on the DS. My God, both Amanda and I went heavy into that game.
Yeah,
and that was just very classic, old school, block by block dungeon crawling.
I can't think of this game.
I think id did it. I think Carmack got
I'm
way
definitely
into
familiar
it.
with the name, but I don't have any.
It was like one of those weird little passion projects of Carmack that he made in like a hotel room in 5 months. Game. Orcs and Elves, I think. Amanda and I quote Orcs and Elves all the time because if you went into the darkness, the main character would go dark. And whenever something's dark, Amanda and I always say that in that voice because it's just, it's like a very not graphically intensive game. Everything's 2D. You're going down the hallways and left, right. Everything's like blocked out like Tetris. When you it's easy to like do a 360 but think you did a 180. You're just like, wait, was this the hallway I went down? Just like Metroidvania, so gratifying to bring up the little block menu and be like, oh, 2 more spaces, and then there's a monster. Like, it's great. Orcs and Elves in the deep. Boys, that can't be. You got to get physical of that. That's not in a store somewhere.
I need it. I need to look up this game.
Just double check what that's called.
I think so.
Orcs and Elves,
it sounds familiar for sure.
Elden Ring is going to be so goddamn good, isn't it? And you know what?
We're all going to get lost in that game. For sure.
Part of me wants to so bad. But I have not watched that gameplay footage. And I refuse
me neither.
to because I want this feeling.
Yeah.
Are you gonna play that network test or you're gonna wait?
Yes. So I realize that this is very much like splitting hairs, but I am totally open to playing the network test because I'm not watching footage of it. I get to be lost, even if it is just a vertical slice.
Yeah.
That to me is like okay. I know it's very strange and specific, but
yeah. Without going too into it, there is a map, but it's very interesting the mechanics of the map.
You said too much.
No, I was worried when you started talking about a map that I was like, oh no, he's ruining it. But then I think you phrased it right, where it's like, no, now I'm just curious. Like I don't feel ruined. Now I'm just curious. Okay.
Are there towers or they're not towers? I'm sorry, it's your show. Continue.
No, yeah. Are you gonna play Elden?
Elden, are you nuts?
I don't know.
Oh my God, open world, yes, open world. It's like open world. Okay, horse. I'm sold.
Okay,
should I take my money?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's gonna do it for Frame Trap. Thank you to everybody who wrote in. Email address is askeasyallies@gmail.com. One more time, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Thank you to my wonderful panelists on this meaty episode, Daniel Bloodworth and Brendan Jones. We talked video games. We had a good time. Until next time.